Welcome to the Talk and Chatter experience powered by Gasoline Alley. Today's guest is Leo Yip, industrial designer, co-founder / director of Ellaspede. Welcome, mate.
Hey, mate. How's things?
Good. I finally remembered one without having to glance down at my piece of paper here. So I'm good.
You're doing well.
Yeah. How are you, man?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good day. Beautiful sunny day outside,
We should be riding bikes, but we're sitting in here in a nice room.
Yeah, it's nice here as well. So,
Yeah, no, it's good. Who's Leo Yip?
I guess he's supposedly an adult who's just who's really a kid inside who hasn't grown up. Definitely someone who aims very hard at being able to do fun things for himself as well as for his family and friends and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm just an industrial designer, trained as an industrial designer, but also have obviously a particular interest within motorbikes.
So why industrial design?
It's funny. I went through school like we sort of all do, and I always thought, okay, I'm going to be, not destined, but I'm more than likely going to have a career in sort of medicine or something along those lines. So all throughout high school, I did all the sciences, and did no art. I did shop only because we had to in like grade 9 or whatever. And I really liked shop, and I really liked art, but they're not the subjects that I did in grade 11 and 12. So then, get to uni, did a year of science, med science, and I was like, oh, I don't know if this is for me. I was like, this is really boring, and I had an interest in learning, but I definitely didn't have an interest in, I think, what the careers were afterwards. So either becoming a doctor or, so on and so forth.
Yep.
So yeah, I just happened to be watching a TV show on Foxtel about two industrial designers. They're affectionately known as the two Dicks, Dick Powwell and Richard Seymour and Dick Powwell. Mm-hmm. They're two English industrial designers, and they're like the granddaddies of product design. And they went on this, they did this series where basically they'd go in and say, okay, well, we want to redesign a hairdryer, and then they'd redesign it, get it to like a full mock-up stage where, you could hold the thing in your hand and everything like that.
Yep.
And, they materialize this out of nothing. And basically they would then go and pitch that to a company. I saw that and I was like, that's what I want to do. I'm like, I want to be able to draw something. I want to be able to think of something in my head, draw it, and then make it a reality.
Wow.
So just that one TV show, I was like, that's it. I went and called up uni the next day. I think, you had to go see like a careers counselor or whatever if you needed to change like degrees or whatever. And I was like, oh, look, I'm quitting uni. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Why are you quitting? I was like, I want to go do this thing called industrial design. And they're like, oh, yeah, cool. Well, you don't need to quit uni. We offer industrial design here. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, oh, perfect. Yep. So, I not looked any further into this thing besides watching this one TV show. So I changed out, and I still had like, I think, a quarter of a semester to go in first year. So I just, did that, smashed it out. And I remember telling my mum and saying, hey, Mum, I'm not going to do medicine anymore.
Oh, no. How'd that go?
Well, as an Asian kid,
yeah.
Telling your parents that you're probably not going to be a doctor. Yeah, it was all right. My parents took it in their stride. They're my parents are pretty cool. They never sort of really pushed me in terms of anything. They're always just like, follow, do what you want to do. They understand that, being in Australia, being in Australian culture, where my sister and I were going to be subjected to a lot of things that are not traditionally Chinese or Asian, and as a result, it really is about us forging our own path, as opposed to, in typical Asian culture, it's like, very hierarchical. The parents will tell you, this is what you're doing, and you will be this, X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
Whereas my parents came from very much like a sort of counterculture, like they listened to the Beatles, like when they were growing up and all that sort of stuff. And my parents moved here when they were like 20 and 19.
So where from originally?
So my parents were originally from Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, okay.
So they came out because my uncle was out here, but my family the Yip family has been coming to Australia for a very long time. So my great-great-granddad came over in a boat. So he literally paid for a ferry ticket to come here with a bunch of his other friends and family. And they came here and they set up essentially like markets in Sydney. So, and some of my cousins actually still run the longest running vegetable market in like the Hay markets, for example. I think it's something like that.
Yep.
And so my great-great-granddad and his brother came out and set that up. And he was like, oh, look, I'm going to go back to Hong Kong and maybe bring some of our other relatives out. But he's like, this is not really for me. He's like, I really want to go back to Hong Kong.
Right.
So he left, and on his passage back, unfortunately passed away, leaving my granddad and my great-grandmother and all that, great-great-grandmother and all that sort of stuff in Hong Kong to sort of essentially sort of, bring themselves up. So my granddad, when he sort of, got to a certain age, my uncle was like, oh, look, I, really want to travel somewhere, like I want to leave Hong Kong. I want to, sort of expand. And he's like, oh, why don't you go to Australia? Because, like we've still got relatives there, they're still there, you could meet with them first and then, go from there. So my uncle came out, I don't know, it must have been like 60s, like maybe even slightly earlier.
Yeah.
Landed in Sydney first, and then went to Adelaide and set up a base in Adelaide. And so my parents, my dad came out to Adelaide, not knowing that my mum was coming to Adelaide. They knew of one another in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And yeah, my dad, I think, just happened to be walking along the street one day, and saw this girl who was in a like a motor vehicle accident, and turned out it was my mum. She'd been hit by a motorbike.
Right.
So my parents are cool with motorbikes still, though. But, but yeah, my dad was like, oh my gosh, I know this chick, and so yeah, they didn't speak a word of English. But my dad knew where the hospital was, so he picked her up and like literally carried her to the hospital, which was, sort of down the road and
That's
stuff.
an incredible story.
It is.
Yeah.
And yeah, they, my dad just sort of stayed by my mum's side from that point on.
Yep.
And, they had my sister, she's about 5 years older than me. And then they had me. So, yeah.
And they, like you were saying before we started this, you started your life in Adelaide. So how long did you stay in Adelaide for?
Until I was in grade 7. So,
Okay,
yeah, that was it was almost the perfect time because my sister was finishing high school and I was about to enter high school.
Yeah, right.
So it meant that she could go to uni up here in Brisbane, and I could obviously attend high school in Brisbane as well.
So you come straight to Brizzy?
Yeah. It's my mum was just sick and tired of the rain and grey sort of drab weather in Adelaide, which is actually kind of funny because pretty much as soon as we left, it started becoming really dry.
Right.
In Adelaide, and the heat in Adelaide is very different to Brisbane, or very different to Queensland. It's it's obviously it's kind of humid up here, whereas down there it's super dry.
Just dry and hot, eh?
Yeah, dry and hot.
Yeah. That's So have you still got any relatives down in Adelaide?
Yeah, still got a heap. So pretty much all throughout all the states.
Yep.
We've got a lot of I guess a lot of Yip history
Yep.
in Australia. So yeah, I've got a lot of cousins and all that sort of stuff. And
Cool.
yeah, I've got some cousins that I've met. They're like, they're white. And you're like, what? And it's like, you're a Yip? That's weird. Obviously, they're sort of, a few, sort of like second or third cousins. Yeah. And you're just like, okay, that's kind of cool.
Wow.
So yeah, it's we've although I'm only technically speaking second generation, I definitely know that we've got a sort of, I guess, quite a deep connection with Australia and all that sort of thing.
100%.
Yeah.
And have you been over to Hong Kong ever?
Yeah, a few times. So
It's an incredible place too, hey?
it's it's a busy place. So my parents made it a point to take my sister and I back there, like when we were young, to sort of, this is kind of where you also come from.
Yep.
It's I think growing up here, you're always trapped in between sort of two worlds. You're kind of trapped between two cultures. Very much on the inside, you're very Australian. Everything you speak about and the people you hang out with, similar sort of culture. But from the outset, it's like, no, you don't look exactly like
Right.
us. But, you know, a couple
Yep.
of minutes into a conversation, people are kind of like, oh,
We're all
okay,
the same.
cool. Yeah, you know, all right, yeah, I get it.
Yep.
But yeah, it is interesting. So my parents always thought it was really important to sort of, I guess, show us the other side of where we've come from. And for me, I think that's been particularly important as I guess maybe as a guy growing up, knowing sort of, oh, okay, well, this is where my ancestors are. Like, you know, this is where my ancestral home is. I'm particularly lucky, I feel, because I still have some cousins who they maintain our family tree. It's this giant book that actually extends back 2,000 years. And so we can track every single yip that's ever been born from this one particular place in, I guess, southern China.
Yeah.
And then eventually they sort of moved to Hong Kong.
Hey, that's incredible. Hey, I really respect that family tree sort of side of it. One of my closest mates, that's turned into like his pastime, his ancestry. Hey, like he's into it. Like it. Once you start delving into it, hey, it's amazing what you find out about your family.
Yeah, Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
You know, they got shows about it and everything.
Oh, it's
so,
huge now, hey.
yeah.
So it's really cool to sort of see, you know, as I say, what sort of where your families come from, what your heritage might be, what this is, and yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So industrial design, we'll go back to that part.
Yeah.
What is industrial design?
It's essentially product design.
Product is one of the main focuses.
Yeah.
Yep.
So every day when you wake up, most people probably have an interaction with, you know, over a couple of hundred different products.
Yep.
Someone's responsible for that. Sometimes it's an engineer. Sometimes it's an inventor. But more often than not, it has to go through a series of processes and checks and balances to become I guess, a fully fledged product at the end of it. Now, I'm a true believer that everyone has design innately built into them. Right. So I equate it to running. So, you know, you see, you know, babies that crawl, walk, then run. Design is exactly the same as that. Probably the only difference between, say, myself as someone who's an industrial designer is that I've had training to run. Now, just like running, there's all different types of running as well. So you've got sprinters, you've got, you know, ultra marathon runners, you've got, you know, 400 meter runners. So I guess as a trained product designer, you can hone your craft and your skill to a particular type of design.
Yeah.
So industrial design's great. You know, it spans, and probably what I guess really appealed to me is that you can apply that process almost across the board to any product. So 1 minute you could be designing. So, you know, for example, you know, after uni, one of the jobs that I had in a consultancy, we're designing Bluetooth headsets. But in that same studio, we were designing ride-on lawnmowers.
Wow.
So it's just the variety that really appealed to me. And that harps back to that TV show that I watched.
That's cool.
Where, you know, the guys are making hair dryers or designing hair dryers, and then they're also building, you know, they were designing chairs for airplanes. And I was sort of thinking, hang on a second, how do these two things correlate? They don't. You know, they're completely different materials, they're different form factors, but you apply that process correctly, and you can apply it to almost any product.
Is it classed as an engineering pursuit?
It's a little bit different. So it's very funny that industrial design, the way I think of best to describe it is that it sits exactly in the middle between art and science.
Yep.
Whereas engineering is more geared towards science, and whereas, like, sort of, I guess, product design, it has standards that are surrounded, but it's not like engineering where you have engineering certification. It's which is something that I think it should, as a body, as a profession, it should have some sort of, I guess, accreditation to it.
For sure.
It actually stems from architecture. So industrial design. So the real genesis and the real, I guess, birth of industrial design is architecture and through the Bauhaus movement. So you had a bunch of artists and some architects, and they basically, this is, you know, they started this movement of making arts and crafts that were mass produced and being able to be made in a repetitive way to exact standards. Whereas obviously arts and crafts, most things that are handcrafted and handmade, you're going to have slight discrepancies.
The tolerance window is going to be a little higher. Wow.
So yeah, you know, the I guess the interesting thing with industrial design is that you're always thinking about how you can make a product, not just design it to be the best it can be, but also make it as efficient as it can possibly be, take as little resources as it needs to actually make the product, the ergonomics of it, the whole life cycle of the actual product, and right down to the packaging and all sorts of things like that. It's a really quite an interesting field, and it's something that can take you to all different types of industries and places. So besides Ellaspede, Steve and I still run Helliver Studios, which is actually our industrial design studio.
Right.
So we still get some pretty interesting projects that come through that have nothing to do with motorbikes whatsoever. And I guess we're sort of in a fortunate position. We've kind of created this position for ourselves where we can kind of be like, that's a really cool product and we really, really want to work on that. Or that's not really sort of what we're into. You're better off actually going to these other design studios because these guys are way more equipped to sort of help you out.
Yep.
And so, we typically try and choose things that are kind of sort of more in the action sports industry, like things that kind of just appeal to us. And, we've done stuff as like skate brands and all sorts of things.
So what's the process? Say Steve's obviously your business partner in Ellaspede and co-founder as well. What's the process? Someone come to you and then do you go and research what's bad, what's good, or what happens?
Yeah. So
that's how it works?
Yeah, 100%. So there's a lot of watching. I love people watching, and so there's a lot of that.
Right.
So you watch how someone interacts with something, and you might find some innovations within that. Or alternatively, you might look at the actual product and you might look at the semantics of it. You're like, hang on a second, why is that color, or why is that shape? It's like, that doesn't make sense. So, good example is, you pop the bonnet of a car up. You look at a car from like the 70s. It's like, I don't know, like everything kind of just looks almost, the same. You pop a car open, today, all the yellow things I can touch. They're the things I can touch. I'm meant to check the dipstick. I'm meant to fill up my water.
Color coded.
Exactly. So that's I guess a really good example of just semantically for a user. There's a small level of innovation there where where car manufacturers realized, okay, this doesn't make sense to general users. They don't know how to check the general, very, very basic general maintenance of a car. So we need to color code this and make it really easy for them to understand. So you might find some small innovations there. From there, you'll go through, after doing a bunch of research, you collate all of that information in your head. You'll start laying pen to paper and you'll actually sketch it out. You might write a few notes and all that sort of thing. But design's a forever cyclical process. A lot of people want to describe it almost as a linear process, which is, sure, that works in a business sense. It's like, okay, we start here, here's the brief, we end here, this is how much money it costs. But in between, the best way it's been described to me is, imagine you had a bowl of spaghetti. Mm-hmm. You pull out one strand of spaghetti and you put it on one side, and you pull out another strand of spaghetti and you put it on the other side. That's actually the design process. That mess in the middle, It's like a reverse explosion.
Wow.
You're collecting all of these pieces and you're like, okay, cool, this is how I piece together this product. And you're forever making compromises. Whether or not it's a compromise based on budget, or whether or not it's a compromise based on manufacturing, processes that are available to the client. So, there are some that are way more costly than others. And so then you start getting into, what's the production run? Are we talking 500 or are we talking 500,000? Because they're very, very different conversations and they're very, very different ways to approach design. So, but that ability to actually make something and create something from A to B, I think is innate in everyone. You look at our ancestors being able to shape a bit of stone to create a knife, or shape a bit of stone to create a spearhead.
It's product design.
Yeah, 100%.
That's what it is. Yep.
Yeah, and that's what's led us to this point, good or bad, in evolutionary history. It's what's led us to this point. So
Mate, what an interesting trade.
Yeah, it's great, and it's not one that's very well known. Whenever you go select the occupation box for something. There's never industrial. There's never product design. So the closest thing is you put down like architecture or engineering or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Who was someone that was like you obviously said about those other people at first, who, like people like Chip Foose or anything like that? Is there people like that you look to in your current world?
Yeah. Well, I guess further along as I got into it more,
Right.
I discovered, just like in any industry, you start fanboying over, it's like, oh, that's that person, they did this and they
That
created
detail
this.
in that.
Yeah. So, initially people like Sid Mead,
Who's Sid Mead?
he's I guess came from like a set design sort of background and did like heaps of like Hollywood films, but he was like a futurist. So he would, literally render on Canson paper. Canson paper is like cardboard, sort of like cardboard texture, but it's colored,
Right.
and then you use colored pencils to draw and render over it. But a lot of like old school Hollywood films used to just literally use hand drawn pictures as green screen backdrops.
Yep.
And so Sid Mead did all these things by hand. He did like the original Blade Runner. So you start learning things like that, and then you get into it a little bit more, and you find people like Chip Foose, and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy can not only draw and think of something in his brain, but he can then go into a workshop and make it. It's like, well, hang on, that's another level right
That's
there.
a different world.
Yeah. So that's so you start to learn, and and local talent here. One of my good mates, Leon, his dad, Brian Fitzpatrick, he's like the granddaddy of product design in Australia.
Really?
He's actually the reason why there's even a degree here in Queensland. He designed the original Stack Hat.
Really?
Yeah, the Urban Turban.
And that was done here.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, by an Australian. People don't even know.
No.
Yeah, it's so and this is a product that is so iconic. You show any kid from the 80s or 90s a Stack Hat.
Stack
and
Hat,
they're
I
like,
know.
cool.
That was always on the handlebars.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was done here.
Yep. Yeah.
And that is one of the things like Australia has had. Hey, we've built some iconic pieces of equipment.
Yep.
Things like Hills hoists,
Yep.
different like as a row of mowers
Yep.
and things like that. We have done some pretty cool stuff here, engineering wise. Hey.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's an industry that should definitely be fostered more here in Australia. I'm a really, really strong proponent that things we consume here should be made here.
Yeah.
Which I know sounds kind of weird because most of the time it's people who look like me who are making our stuff in another country, but I really think it's about our own industry and being able to produce things ourselves. For me it just makes zero efficiency sense or environmental sense to dig a bunch of stuff out of the ground, ship it to somewhere else for them to reprocess it for us, turn it into a little product so that we can then click on it online to then order it and bring it back here. And I'm not even talking about like it has to be mass scale stuff. Like I'm not even talking about we have to have, have Mitsubishi, car manufacturing back here or anything like that. I'm talking, like small industry stuff. We should really, really capitalize on that. Because otherwise, 50, 100 years down the track, where we're going to be, there's going to be no skills. Like you already can't just go down your local corner shop and say, oh, hey, can you fix this for me?
No.
That doesn't exist. And, there's a lot of resources and a lot of materials to make that thing. One of the guys recently at work bought I think one of those like grill oven things or like a little rice cooker type thing or whatever from like Kmart. And I was like, oh, how much did you pay for it? And they're like, $13. I'm like, $13?
For all that.
Yeah. And I'm like, someone is paying for that. Like, obviously not us, like as the consumer, but someone is working in terrible conditions. Alternatively, environmentally, they're obviously that place is not wherever it's being
torturing
spat up.
something.
Yeah. It's ruining the environment. Whatever it is, it's someone is paying for that. And I think I have no qualms with paying more for something if it's made here or if it's made in a really good way and if it lasts a long time. Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
But the steps, like you're saying about the steps, like this step, you pull it out of the ground here to this part, to this part. There's surely, even in a large scale stuff, there's surely a better way.
Oh, yeah.
Here. I feel that there's got to be. So how do you go about from drawing to getting your hands dirty, doing the actual fabrication stuff? Were you ever like into fab or how'd that start?
I I'd probably say, yeah, my parents. My parents on the side of owning
So they're restaurant people. They had restaurants.
Yeah, so my parents had restaurants, but
Yep.
on the side they also built houses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my dad's super handy.
Right.
Like my dad is like definitely a jack of all trades and a master of many. So no, whereas I would say I'm definitely a jack of all trades, but probably
Master of a few.
Yeah. I haven't quite made it to his level yet. You
Yep.
know, like my dad, like single-handedly, built like our family home in Adelaide.
Wow.
Big house too, like big four-story house. Like dug a pool with his bare hands. Like he's just like my dad's just like a super hard worker.
Yep.
And my mum's incredibly creative, so but she doesn't really tap into that side too much. My mum's very business orientated as well. But yeah, like my mum was an incredible painter, like a really good drawer and all that sort of thing. And so is my dad. My dad did a lot of drawing as a kid and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I think I get maybe some of that from them. But I guess design is always just a battle of communication.
Right.
So we can communicate like this,
Yep.
verbal communication. I can draw something down and you can interpret that and go, I know what you're talking about, Leo. That's what that is. Alternatively, you may not understand any of those things, or alternatively, I might still need to figure out in my brain. So I'll run into the workshop, bang a couple of things together and be like, look, this is kind of what I'm talking about. And then it's like, oh, okay, cool. I understand that. And then eventually when it becomes a final product, be it a motorbike or whatever, that's just a communication of expression. So this is how I see the world for this particular product, and this is how I think it should. This is how I'm communicating to you as to how it should look, feel, and work and function as a product or a motorbike or whatever it is.
It's like a language.
100%.
This is the language I've spoken.
Yep.
This is what I'm putting out.
Yeah, and within design, there's different languages as well. So you have like a minimalist sort of design. You'll have, you go back to all the different sort of architectural sort of design, phases. So you'll have like Rococo. You'll have like Art Nouveau. You'll have Art Deco. They're all different languages of the time. I'd say right now, we're sort of in like a post. Sort of modern minimalist sort of vibe
Of design era.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, a lot of geometric shapes and very clean lines. And Apple can 100% be attributed to all of that. Like everyone back in the early 2000s when Apple launched the clearback iMac. What happens? All Nokia screen, all Nokia phones. You had different like clip faces and all that sort of stuff, and they're all clear faces that you could get.
Everything changed, hey?
Yeah, and and Apple's still definitely leading the way in terms of language for design.
You feel that they're like the market leader?
I definitely think that they're the market leader in terms of aesthetics for electronics.
Okay.
I wouldn't say like for all products. Otherwise, we'd be driving around in like I guess Apple styled cars, and I don't know how that would look.
Because it seems to me the technology game, whether it be computer like laptops, probably laptops or phones, are the ones that lead the design charge in everything. Though, hey, just the evolving world. Would that be right?
Yeah, probably like because they're the most highly consumed product, and as such, obviously, then they're advertised back to us. So then that's what we see.
They need to change.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. I would say there's a really big movement for more. The electronics industry is terrible for environmental.
Indeed.
So I would say that there's probably going to be a shift from that at some point. There has to be, and you can see that a little bit in the fashion industry, in fashion design in particular. Fashion design's like the third worst polluting industry in the entire world.
Really?
Yeah. Like fast fashion, like is horrible. It's you think when you drop a T-shirt off to like a Lifeline or whatever, it's cool, yeah, it's going to a good home. It's like someone else is going to wear this, or someone else is going to buy this. Nah, man, that stuff just gets bundled up, put on a ship, and then shipped out to somewhere to then be buried in landfill. And like a T-shirt takes like hundreds of years to decompose.
Yeah.
And not to mention that it's all generally made from cotton, and okay, where's that cotton source from, and all the pesticides made to so all of this is all cyclical. But then you've got companies like Arc'teryx, for example, who like they make really, really expensive gear, but at the end of life, at the end of use, you can sell your jacket back to them, and then they'll fix whatever's damaged with it, and they'll sell that as a secondhand item. So you can start to see it's like, okay, well, there will be that, Apple is doing it to a degree. You can resell your phone back to them. They usually give you like $10 for it.
They give you 1/100th of the price.
Yeah, exactly. But there's been concepts out there where you can literally hot dock your processor out. So you literally pull your processor out and put a new processor in, and that's the only thing that changes. Whereas the body of the phone stays the same, everything else all stays the same, and you just go in and individually remove components and upgrade them, which I think is a more sustainable way to go. And
Definitely.
yeah, so I think as the big player in the market, they really should have a bigger skew towards protecting the resources that we use.
Makes sense, because you imagine, I don't know the numbers, but imagine the product they're putting out. Made it be huge.
And everyone at home has like about 7 phones sitting in their drawer.
Yeah.
They're all, oh yeah, that was my first iPhone.
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't judge it. You know what I mean? Like I can't say, I don't do that, because everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah.
So,
but as a consumer, you shouldn't have to judge it.
No.
As a consumer, you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to think, oh, should I buy this or should I not buy this? As a product designer, I should say, this is what we're doing because of these reasons.
Yep.
And as product design becomes, or industrial design becomes a longer running industry, there's just more layers that gets added. So, really this started, I don't know, you could say around about the sort of industrial revolution, the first industrial revolution. Since initially it was, okay, we need to make this, how do we make products as efficient as possible? We need to make these things as cheap as possible so then we can sell them for as much as possible and make the most of them.
right.
That was the only criteria.
Yep.
And then next minute it was, okay, we need to make ours look different to the competitors' one. Okay, cool. Next minute, there's human factors involved. Ours is better to hold in the hand. Okay, well, so then there's an ergonomic innovation and an advantage over someone. Then it's like, okay, well, ours is more sustainable. And then the next thing is, ours has the latest tech. So these are all things, as an industrial designer, you now have to think about constantly when you're designing something, putting pen to paper.
So the brief's gone from half a page to this huge thing.
Yeah, to a huge document. And it is very interesting as a product designer looking at it, because a lot of the time, and this is not me saying this is Dieter Rams, who, again, is the grandfather of product design. He spent most of his life designing for Braun, is how we say it here in Australia, but it's pronounced Brown.
Right.
And he is the man who Apple looked to, who Jonathan Ives looks to for design inspiration in terms of his aesthetic and all that sort of thing. But, he has the 10 commandments of design, and the 10th commandment is as little design as possible.
Just minimal.
Well, not as in, you probably should that product even exist?
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, we have these conversations all the time at work.
Yep.
We're like, oh, man, this would be a great idea. We should do this. And then you mull over it, and you think about it, and you think, oh, man, we're going to have to do this and this and this and this and this and this. And it's like, what, just so we can sell a few dollars worth of something? I don't think that's a good product. It's like, that's not really helping people, or that's not really, whatever it is. And there's plenty of these products out there. I mean, you go to a $2 shop and, you'll see heaps of these things. But, you got to understand that they're taking resources out of the ground, making it into something which is effectively just going to become landfill, sort of at the end of the day.
Like the stands in the malls.
Yeah.
They're just selling junk. I was walking through them all the other week, and there's this little thing that's flying through the thing. Look at this, and people lining up. I think this guy's going to sell a fortune of these. And that's all it is. It'll be landfill in 2 rides.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And I can't hate the hustle, because I understand that, that person's going to make money and they got to sell something. But as a product designer, we have a responsibility, and being educated in it. If I wasn't educated in it, and I was like, hey, I had this genius idea, and then went and went through the process and had it made. Okay, cool. I can't blame you. But having had the education, and having, I think, 15 years in the game, it's like you start thinking, okay, well, there is a larger social responsibility. It's like, oh, should this exist? Then there's the whole, argument of, oh, if you don't design it, someone else will. It's like, okay, cool, we'll let someone else design it, because I don't want that on my conscience.
Yeah, just leave that path there.
Yeah.
So mate, we haven't even touched. We're a motorbike show. We haven't even spoken of a motorbike yet. I'm just so intrigued in design. So does it go down the path of like color theory and everything?
Everything.
Well?
So color theory, that's less an industrial designer's bag. There are actual people out there, their entire job is a color theorist. So the bigger the company you work for, the more silo the jobs become.
Yep.
So I went through uni. In my 4th year of university, I decided I wanted to get like a taste of the real world. So what I ended up doing was ended up interning pretty much for free for an entire year for arguably, or it was definitely Brisbane's largest industrial design company at the time. And, then we ended up at the time growing to be bigger and, top 5, top 10 maybe.
Wow.
Really, really good company. And I got to learn under some amazing people. But we were a pure consultancy. So you had, 10, 15 desks, everyone with double monitors, pumping CAD, drawing, and we were all industrial designers. Eat, live, and breathe that stuff.
Wow.
So that was really cool in the sense that you could see a product go through its entire life cycle and its entire journey. And then you could basically, I guess you could learn a lot about heaps of different products. So that's sort of one model of design, which is consultancy. The other model is you end up working in-house, and most consultants end up in-house eventually because you just get burnt out in consultancy. You work 12, 16-hour days and you're smashing out really big projects. Whereas in-house, it's a bit more siloed. So you'll have a color theorist, you'll have an ergonomist, you'll have an engineer, you'll have all of these people in a team and you'll work together. And you basically, go through and say, okay, cool. Well, I'm thinking about doing this. What's your input in it? Those projects usually take a lot longer. So a great example is Breville, an Australian company.
Yep.
We all know, Breville. You go into DJs or something like that to go buy something from Breville. At the end of the day, they only design 4 products a year. All the rest of the products are all just sourced from a manufacturer, usually in China. So this manufacturer will have just catalogs of kettles. And then Beryl will say, I'll take that one and we'll just have it in this color with this branding and we'll have 10,000 of them. Whereas the team who look after all the design work for it, they'll spend a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years designing a blender. And it'll be like the best damn blender.
Yep.
But usually that's the highest price blender in their blender range.
It's their signature item.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's, when I say it can take you to all different places, it really can. And you're now starting to see industrial designers venture into UI and UX. So as an industrial designer, you learn, I guess, a lot of user-centered approach. So I'll put myself in a customer's shoes and I'll say, oh, well, how would I interact with this product? I've never seen one of these things before. I'm an alien that's just landed on Earth.
Yep.
I've never seen one of these things before. How do I interact with this? Oh, okay, cool. Oh, well, this thing moves. Oh, okay, cool. Oh, it moves. It turns. Oh, okay. I've turned it all the way and it turns on. Okay, cool. And so you kind of go through all of those processes in your head and you think, okay, well, semantically, how's that going to work? Form factor-wise, how's that going to work? Does it fit nice in the hand? Or a lot of our stuff that we design it's like table size, and smaller. It's whereas architecture is, built environment. So we're actually inside the product. Whereas for industrial design, we interact with it on a human scale.
Tangible holding item and that.
Yeah, touching, feeling, looking. And so it's just a different way of looking at things. So, like sort of looking around the room here today, it's like, I can look at something and be like, okay, well, that's how that's made. That's made from that material.
Don't look how bad we're Don't get too judgy.
This is great. Nah. It's great. But, it's like you start to see the world in a little bit of a different way. Yeah.
Do you turn off?
Not really. It's but I don't see it as I really don't see it as a job. I really see it as a way. As a kid, I've always wanted to be able to. I just think back, like for one of my birthdays, I really wanted to make this water balloon cannon.
Right.
And I had this idea in my mind. It was a piece of PVC tube, and you'd drop the water balloons in, and have a big slingshot, and it'd shoot the water balloons out.
Yep.
But I had no concept of mechanically how to how to make this thing. Had it all drawn out and everything. I'm talking like really young. Like, I had it all drawn out and everything. I'm like,
this can happen.
This is how I'm going to make it. This
Just
is how I'm
the
going to make
propulsion
this.
part.
Yeah. I was like, but I had no idea how to actually physically put it all together. And I guess I never wanted to be in that position again. I wanted to be able to like dream of something and say, oh, okay, I can make that a reality. It might take a lot of hard work or it might take a lot of money or whatever, but I just want to be able to make whatever it is that enters my mind. I have to be careful, I guess, sometimes because I can definitely dive into some like rabbit warrens. Like I'll just start, looking at something on Pinterest and I'll be like, man, that's kind of cool. And then I'll like, next minute, 12 hours later, I've got a whole Pinterest folder. I've like started sketching stuff, and most of the time I just sort of put that away, and I might come back to it in a month's time, and I'm like, yeah, what the hell was I thinking? I'm like, well, I have no interest in this particular subject anyways. I just wanted to draw something. So yeah,
just the rabbit warren, chasing them.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, what do you think?
Legend.
Yeah,
for sure. So turn the game.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, yeah. So I was interested to hear like your opinion on him as a design sort of thing. What do you think of his products?
I think they're interesting, in the sense that they push a different narrative. So it's most of the time it's almost shock value narrative. So it's whatever we need to do to sort of stay on the tip of people's tongue, and I can get that.
It's like a PR build.
A little bit.
Yep.
I mean, you look at the Tesla truck. It's like, okay, yeah, there's practical aspects about it. It's exactly the same reason as to why Defender, the original Defenders, had just big panels of aluminium.
Yep.
It was pretty much the same reason. But stylistically, it just looks so far removed. And I guess stylistically, it's such a juxtaposition between that and, say, a Model S that I think people are like, oh my gosh, like,
yes.
Yeah. So it's like, whereas most car makers are now trying to build families. So, you look at like a VW range, for example, it's like, you can see a design language through that. Sure. Whereas I think, Tesla are, they're changing the game in the sense, it's like, no, it should reflect the purpose. So this Ute shouldn't look like a Model S because it's not trying to go Model S speed. Although I'm pretty sure it probably will.
It will.
But, this thing's meant to be utilitarian.
Yep.
It's meant to be so that I can, take it out and get it scratched or whatever, and I can change a panel and click a different panel on. It cost me a lot of money to change that panel.
So cool. I like it.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it looks cool.
Yeah.
I think it's an absolute game changer if it goes ahead.
Yeah.
And it will go ahead, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
But,
and what a cool story for someone like him, started PayPal.
Yeah.
And, and then it's like, oh, cool. I like cars. I like rockets.
Yep.
And just
like
being
flamethrowers.
Yeah. And he's 100% like the actual real life Iron Man.
Yeah.
So
he's a weapon.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoy listening to him.
Yeah.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible human, and it'd be good to have another 5 or 6 of him floating around. It'd be interesting to see where we go.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and they're around, obviously, no doubt, but he's just in the mainstream. You get to see him. So
yeah.
Why motorcycles? Let's talk motorcycles.
I don't know. I guess it probably just goes back to my childhood. I guess.
Is that something from a kid?
Biker mice from Mars.
Oh no, we are the same age.
I don't know. I just never had motorbikes as a kid. I didn't even know anyone with a motorbike as a kid. I don't know. It's just one of those things. I think it's always a cool thing when you see it in popular culture. So, cartoons. It's always the cool people, who are riding a motorbike. Movies, Terminator 2.
I was about to say Terminator 2.
Yeah. That's so iconic, I think, for people our age.
It is.
In cool stunt movies, it's always, the baddies are always riding motorbikes, but they're always going super fast. Yep. I never understand why the car just doesn't stop. I just sort of think that's that would be the one thing. You just stop and the bike would obviously hit the car. But
logical doesn't always work.
But movies like Jackie Chan, like I think Armor of God 2, he rides like a YZ in that. It's just cool popular culture references. I saved up all of my money. So I used to work for my parents. I used to work in the restaurant. So, I started working for them, I think probably in grade 5.
Wow.
Family, we had family run businesses.
Yeah.
So you do whatever you can do to help. I remember the first thing I really wanted to buy was a mountain bike. This is, right when hardtail mountain bikes were becoming a thing. This was becoming a mass.
Just post BMX.
Yeah.
Hardtail coming.
You remember it? We're the same age. So, I had this crappy old BMX, and I was like, I want to try to sell this thing for money. And so I was like, all right, I'll clean this up. And I spray painted it. I thought it was fantastic paint job. The guy at Cash Converters didn't. My parents drove me around to, I think, 3 or 4 Cash Converters, and the best price I could get for this thing was about $15. And I think I needed to get to $300 and something for this this crappy Kmart mountain bike,
yep.
which I thought was the best because I picked it out of the lot. And I was like, all right. So I eventually sold it, I think my grandma bought it off me to give to my cousin because she was sick and tired of being in the car with us. But anyways, so I saved up.
Cash Converters.
So I saved up heaps of money, and my parents were like, look, if you want to help out, you can come work,
yep.
With us, after school and stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. So I did that, saved up some extra money, went and bought this push bike, and it was the best thing. And my parents are, they were migrants to this country. They didn't speak a word of English when they first came here. My parents worked incredibly hard. I look at myself and I think, oh, geez, I'm lazy, I got it lucky. My parents, literally worked 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, raising 2 kids. And so, this push bike used to go in the back of the car, and I'd ride around in the car park all the time. And then, every now and then I'd jump in and help mum and dad, do some stuff. They ran the police club in Adelaide originally, so that was they don't exist anymore because of corruption issues with the police.
So what was it? Tell me, what's a police club?
So essentially, it's a club, restaurant, pub.
Oh,
just for police.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure other people could go in there as well.
Yeah.
But
the corruption took over.
I just think a lot of people, they used to have that saying, you can't trust a cop who doesn't drink.
Right.
So, they would all go there,
yep.
after a shift or whatever, they would be, standing around drinking, and they were incredibly nice. I actually wanted to be a cop because of it, because these people were genuinely really nice people. But then I think obviously, you get a couple of bad eggs, and they're like, look, we got to, anything seen like this, we got to get rid of it. So my parents managed that for quite a while.
Wow.
3 or 4 levels, and they did functions and all that sort of stuff. So every cop in Adelaide got married at the police club. So, as a kid on a Saturday afternoon after cricket or whatever sport I decided to choose that summer, I would go help my parents clean up, the function, and there'd be broken records and cake and stuff everywhere. And it'd be 200 people had been through this place. And so you'd go through and clean up all that stuff. But I remember chicken parmesanas. I used to have to make chicken parmesanas all the time. So, I'd do the breadcrumbing and all that sort of stuff. So even now, if, my wife's like, oh, I feel like a chicken parmesan. If I'm at home making it, I'm like, man, this just takes me back to being a grade 4, grade 5 kid, making money to fund my bicycle habit. And but anyways, so I guess, from there, I kind of developed, I guess, a passion for riding and riding push bikes and all that sort of thing. And then I kept working for my parents in varying restaurants and all that sort of stuff right up until sort of, 3rd or 4th year uni. And by the end of high school, I had enough money to go buy a car. And I went all out. I bought a Sylvia 15.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So
you and Hewan, mate.
and Steve's a Nissan man as well.
Oh, is he as well?
Yeah. He you'll have to get him on so he can talk to you about his Nissan. I'll butcher any specs. That I buy things because they look good.
Yep.
They just usually happen to be all right in other ways as well.
Yeah, right.
So what got me on the S15 was just the tail. That rear
tail light?
Yeah, the tail lights and how flat that section was. I was like, man, this is a sick car. I think I bought the second one in Brisbane. I bought it from a dealership. Like literally, this is all of my money, like that I'd saved up from you know as a kid, not having any expenses or anything like that.
So non-import one, proper legit.
No, it was a full
S15.
Yeah.
Cool car.
Yeah, and then I guess how it became a motorbike is that it sort of maybe ended up in an accident.
No.
So,
what happened?
Look, the story to the insurance company is that I had new tires put on, which I did, and I was just turning a corner, and it just slipped out, and next minute ended up in a gutter. So, and you know, before anyone says, it had nothing to do with the fact of my cultural background and me driving. So
gold.
It's it was just one of those things. It was just me being young and silly and
Happens.
stuff. Yeah, and so I think I did the community a service because it just means that they're rarer.
Yep.
And the demand is going to be higher for them. So
What colour did you have?
pewter.
What's pewter?
The silver grey one.
Nice.
That's how it was pitched
Is
as a pewter color.
Pewter,
So they had that and the canary yellow, and then
red.
they had the black and red,
Yep.
and they had the blue as well.
Oh, nice car.
They were an awesome car, and I still think that I might rebuy another one.
Yeah, cool.
But you just got to try to find one that hasn't been around a drift track and been flogged.
Yeah, or into a gutter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, looking back, I probably should have kept the wreck. But anyways,
So it was a write-off?
it was full write-off.
Yep.
Yeah. Airbags, I think, were about that far away from deploying in my
Ooh.
face. So yeah, it was like proper gone.
Yeah, she's gone. Yep.
Yeah. And so I was without a car for quite a while.
Yep.
And I was just driving around in my dad's Pajero and,
Yep.
thinking, man, this sucks. Nothing against Pajeros. I think, full drives are cool.
Yeah, but you just come out of your car that you love.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I started looking straight away. I was like, okay, cool. What car am I going to buy next? And then I was like, oh, do I buy another S15? Do I buy a Skyline? What do I buy?
Yep.
And then a mate of mine just happened to hand me a Monster Children magazine. I don't know if they exist anymore, but it was this weird format, like sort of landscape A4 format magazine. It was quite popular and sort of like had a lot of surf content, just a lot of sort of popular culture content in it. I remember turning to the page and I was like, what the hell is this motorbike? And I was already looking at motorbikes sort of at the time because I was like, oh, I need an easy way to still get to uni, sort of go from home to uni to then to the consultancy to intern. Cause I was kind of doing that, and I need something that's really easy for parking because parking the cars are terrible for around one for uni, but then also two at the consultancy. And so I came across this bike and I was like, man, this is rad. This looks nothing like the other bikes that I've seen. And it was a Deus bike. So this was literally a month after they started, and I was like, that's what I'm buying. So I jumped on the phone. I jumped on their website. I think they still had a holding page at this stage. They had nothing on there, and I was like, man, this is cool. And so I called up and was like, hey, I want to buy one of these bikes. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, well, we don't have any stock. Like we're gonna build them and then sort of ship them to people. I was like, all right, cool. And I was like, how do I do this? What do I do? And they were like, oh, well, we don't have any like formal process at the moment. And they're like, oh, we're kind of only really building it for people in Sydney. So I was like, all right, okay, cool. All right. Hung up the phone, booked the plane ticket, flew down to Sydney, I think on a Saturday morning, bright and early Saturday morning, went to the day of shop, and like Dare Jennings is still hanging up like motorcycle jackets, him and his wife. They were still setting the place up.
Wow.
And I met with this guy, I'm pretty sure his name was Sean, really, really nice dude. And he was one of their kind of like sales guys that they had on at the time. And he kind of walked me through a few of the bikes that they had on there. And I was like, oh, I want that one. It was a TW200. And he's like, okay, cool. And he walked me through all the different options. And so, I got the extended swing arm. I got, this little peanut tank. I just went like all out. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. Like, I want to pick all this stuff. And so I rode that around for, I think, 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
I loved it. That was an awesome little bike.
Did you ride it back up or did you get it shipped?
I didn't.
No.
I happened to tell Dare that I was from Brisbane. And he's like, hang on, you've flown all the way from Brisbane to come buy this bike? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh, I think we'll ship it up to you for free. And I was like, okay, cool.
Wow.
And this is before Deus bikes had Deus written on them.
Right.
So this was like people were like, what is this thing? So like I'd be riding around and people just be like leaning out the windows, giving me thumbs up, and I started getting into it more, like, okay, where does this aesthetic come from? And, you know, like what is this? So then come to learn that Dare Jennings had obviously spent a lot of time with Mambo in Japan, and that how this was a full aesthetic and a full movement in Japan to kind of like make mini replicas of what they saw happening, you know, sort of in the UK, you know, in terms of, you know, building cafe races and all that sort of stuff. And then they wanted to mimic that, but they didn't have the English bikes to build from, but they had obviously all the Japanese bikes. So, you know, this was like a huge subculture in Japan. So I was like, cool, I want to go to Japan.
Yeah.
So right as I finished uni, I thought, oh, look, I've gone through all this schooling, gone through university, I'm about to go get a job. I would love to spend, you know, like a couple of weeks in Japan. I want to have a holiday and I want to go check out all these cool motorbikes. At the time, I'd sort of just started dating my wife. And so we had like one date, and then the second date, I think I was like, hey, you want to come to Japan with me?
Wow.
And she was like, this seems a bit... We'd known one another through uni. She was a year below me, so
Okay.
she's an industrial designer as well.
Yep.
That's how much I love design.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we ended up going to Japan, and, yeah, we spent a lot of time, like, checking out motorbikes and all that sort of stuff, and she was cool with it.
Yep.
Her whole family rides, and I didn't know any of this when I
Oh, really?
first started dating her. She's like, oh, yeah. She's like, yeah, my dad's into bikes. My brother's into bikes. My granddad was into bikes. Carolyn's granddad actually hand-built a Harley from scratch. He ordered parts from, like, a catalogue way back in the day. And he built a 1929... Now, I always get this wrong. Either the more popular ones are singles and he's built a twin, or the more popular ones are twins and he's built a single. So it's very rare.
Yep.
I think when Ross had it registered, there was only one other one in Australia, and this thing's, you know, got like a magnesium lamp, and like it's proper old school. Like you trim it on the, you know, on the handlebars, and
Wow.
it's unrideable.
It's too antique.
Yeah. But Ross actually rides it.
Does he?
Carolyn's, yeah. So my father-in-law, he rides it around and stuff, and
Wow.
I just sort of think, far out, like it's very cool. So she actually came from like a motorbiking family, and so she could understand like the capture of it for me. Like as soon as I started getting into it, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And from a designer's perspective, it's almost or for me at least, it's the ultimate product, in the sense that you can't hide too much. So some products you can hide things. You're like, you know, like you need a, you know, I don't know, there's a PCB, or there's cables or whatever. You can hide a lot of stuff. With a motorbike, it's very honest. Particularly naked bikes, they're quite honest. You can't sort of be like, oh, we're just gonna have this like cable running through here. It's like, wouldn't it look better if it ran through the handlebars and you couldn't see it at all? It's a lot cleaner, and so there's a purity about it that I really like. And also, I guess at Ellaspede at least, you know, we only build, you know, we build one-offs for people. We build a bike, and that's for the client. It's tailor made for them, and that's a unique experience in itself, which you're not going to get when you're producing 5,000 off on a product. Most of the time you don't even see the end consumer. You're like, okay, you see it in the shelves when you're at a shop. You're like, oh, cool, yeah, there's a whole rack of the stuff that came out of my brain on that shelf, but you get no human interaction. And we've been really, really fortunate. The customers that we've had are amazing people, and they've allowed us to express ourselves with their input, and create something together with them. And that's something that you don't get on the other side of product design. So it's probably more the arts and crafts side, whereas the design stuff that we do is probably still more leaning towards the science engineering side. So
Makes sense.
yeah.
Definitely makes sense. So how did you go from riding this TW200 to owning Ellaspede? So you and Steve met in uni?
Yeah. So yeah, Steve and I met at uni. We left uni. I worked at the consultancy. Steve actually worked for a medical design company. So they were doing they were making like artificial sort of like eyeballs and artificial hearts and stuff so that surgeons could train to learn how to do operations and procedures.
Wow.
So again, the diversity of design.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was in this consultancy, 12, 16 hours a day working on weekends. I was very, very fortunate to end up at CMD, which was the consultancy. And I was very, very fortunate to end up under the tutelage and mentorship of my good mate, Neil. He's my good mate now. He was my mentor then. Neil taught me a lot, and he's an avid motorbike rider.
Right.
A very, very, very good motorbike rider.
Yep.
And so he kind of spurred that along in me a little bit more. So we'd go riding, we'd go camping with the boys at work, and we'd ride and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And a lot of the guys there were all just a little bit older. So family, kids, mortgage. So I kind of was this sort of fresh uni student, just like, I guess, the office jokester. Because, I'd be like, man, you guys are so old and all that sort of stuff. And I guess it kind of dawned on me one day, like I sort of stuck my head up out of my little sort of cubicle area and I was like, man, yeah, I guess that's next, isn't it? Like, I'm dating this really cool chick and, like, I guess, you'd get married and then you'd have kids and then I guess, I just keep doing design stuff. And then I was like, I wonder if I should like do something else before that all happens.
Right.
And so for me, I was kind of like, like, and sort of at the time I was interested in doing more stuff with my hands as well. Mm-hmm. So what they don't tell you in product design at university is that you're probably spending 10% of your time actually designing and 90% of your time managing Excel spreadsheets.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of behind the scenes, non-glitzy, non-glamorous stuff. There's
like
a lot
cataloging, sort of
all sorts of stuff.
Everything.
Like cataloging stuff. Like reading spec sheets of particular materials. Like, okay, what's the UV rating on a particular plastic? How long is that going to last? Okay, what additives can be added into it? So there's this whole under sort of level of stuff that happens before a product ever ends up on market. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of that I was kind of like, oh yeah, it's cool because I'm learning a lot, and that whole place was just it was steel sharpened steel type thing. Like all of those guys who were there were all guns.
Yep.
Like you weren't invited into the consultancy unless you were all right.
On top of their game.
Yeah, yep. I mean, me and another couple of good buddies of mine, like we all graduated like top of our class at uni. I feel like I talked my way into CMD, and then I just faked it, and then they just fell in love with me. So then they were like, I can't get rid of Leo.
Yeah, he's got to stay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Like, and most of those guys all own their own consultancies now, and they're all very, very successful. But yeah, for me, it was a lot of bit kind of like I don't know if that's the direct path in which it just seemed too set out, I guess. And so I was kind of like, building this like hobby workshop at home. And I look back now, I think, man, you had no idea what tools you were buying, Leo. I'm like, yeah, that looks cool. I'll buy that. Like,
that's a good design.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I'm like, oh, that looks cool.
Yep.
Like, I think at one stage I was looking at Porsche design tools.
Wow.
And I'm like, really, at the end of the day, as long as the tool does its job, who needs a Porsche design tool? So Ducati do. All Ducati bikes are built with Porsche design tools. Yeah. So, but anyways, that's a side note.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, cool. Yeah. I want to build stuff, and my dad being sort of like quite handy. I always just thought my dad sort of like some of my favorite memories with me and my dad are like, oh, let's go to the hardware store. Like going to Mitre 10 as a kid, and now going to Bunnings as an adult.
Oh, you've turned over.
But like that was it. Like I used to always follow my dad like on weekends and stuff. Like we'd be going to Mitre 10, going to the hardware store, and like look at tools, and I'd be like, oh man, that's cool. And so I started collecting and wanting to just make stuff at home. And then I started sort of tinkering a little bit on the Deus bike, and then I was like looking at it, and I was kind of like, oh, I guess this is kind of just another product. And I started looking into, I guess, more designers who had designed motorbikes. So guys like Glenn Kerr, So if you've owned a sports bike in the 90s, this man designed it. Now everyone rides around on a Kiska design motorbike. So they designed for KTM, they designed for Husqvarna, they designed for pretty much everyone. So yeah, I started looking into that world a little bit more, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And this is almost around about the peak of American Chopper and all that sort of stuff. And then I started looking into things, and I'm like, wow, there's these guys called like Arlen Ness and Indian Larry. And then, looking into all these like Japanese builders, and I'm like, wow, these guys are so cool. Like, they can materialize what they're thinking, and their process is different. A lot of the times these guys aren't, I guess, classically trained as a product designer, but they're like, I can see the form in this flat piece of metal, and then they make that happen. And I guess for me, I can see, I know what the end product's going to look like. Usually I sketch it out a few times first to be like, okay, cool, that's the way I want it to be. But I was missing that step in terms of being able to, again, communicate myself in a three-dimensional form as to how, that would look. I could CAD it, that's not a problem. But getting someone to make that CAD, that was an issue.
Right.
So 2009, I'd said to Steve, I was like, we were just sort of catching up. So there was a good core group of us at uni who, sort of all, used to sort of catch up and stuff every now and then. And I was catching up with Steve over some pizza, and I was like, oh man, I really kind of really like want to get in building motorbikes, and I want to just sort of build one for myself and see what that's like. And I wouldn't mind like, designing products that don't necessarily have a client attached. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to have a business where you could design a product where you saw there was a need in the market for it, being able to produce it, being able to back it yourself. Because at this stage, I really wanted to know what it was like post-design. How do you sell a product? How do you market a product? How do you, how do you...
that next stage.
Yeah, how do you stock inventory a product? Like, I had no idea about any of this sort of stuff. So, I was kind of like, oh, I'd be interested in that. And Steve just happened to be sort of almost wrapping up with the medical consultancy that he was working with. And he was like, man, that sounds like a cool idea. Like, maybe we could do something sort of with that. So the idea was that we'd design products and then, muck around with cars and motorbikes and stuff like that, sort of in our spare time. So we set up a studio at the back of my house. I was still working at the consultancy at the time. My parents sort of, you can't run 12, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, working without your body, copping or hiding.
Yep.
My parents' health sort of started to deteriorate a tiny little bit. So I then sort of helped out managing the restaurant at night. And then on weekends, I would basically be committing all of my energy and effort to Helliver, the design studio. And then we had no idea what we were doing with the motorbikes. We were just mucking around, really. They were just a kind of fun little project that we were doing on the side. So I was kind of doing all of that all at the same time whilst trying to date my now wife. She's very understanding. She's a very, very lovely girl.
Jeez, you're splitting your time, eh?
Yeah. So, but, that's
how it is.
I think when you're young as well, you're kind of like, I'm enthusiastic. I can do this. When else am I going to do it? When I get older, I'm not going to have the energy, so I might as well burn the candle at both ends. And now,
let it happen now. Yep.
So any money that Steve and I made through that business, we basically poured straight back into building up the workshop. And Steve's a lot older than me. Maybe I shouldn't say it like that. Steve's a lot more mature, and he's got a few years on me. Okay,
You've made him out like he's like
he's not ancient. He's not ancient.
I help Steve into the shop each day.
Oh, that's terrible. No. He's definitely not that old.
No.
But he's very youthful. He's very youthful looking. If people, you want to know the secret to being youthful, be a vegetarian, because that's what Steve is, and he's very youthful. Yeah, so I was kind of doing all of those things.
Yep.
At the same time, and I eventually left CMD, and those guys were great. It had nothing to do with them. It was more sort of about me and my life journey and what I sort of wanted to do. So Steve and I thought, we're doing motorbikes. What's a real need product out there? And started looking at a few things that are on a motorbike. And we're like, geez, rego labels are pretty ugly, aren't they? And so we're like, maybe there's something there. Maybe we could sort of, revamp what a rego label holder looks like. Mm-hmm. So you got to understand, we only had a set amount of money that we had. We wanted to build up a bit of a workshop, and we knew the cost of, I guess, proper productionizing something. It's not a small amount of money. And so we're like, okay, let's pick something small, manageable, minimal parts, and a process in which we can control. So we're like, okay, cool. All right, well, we'll look at these little rego holders. And so we ended up making these little tubed ones. And, there are others on the market, like CNC machined and all that sort of stuff. And we're like, okay, well, we can mass manufacture that process quite easily. Instead of CNC machining, we're going to die cast these things, and we're going to produce 5,000 in one hit. So we designed this product up, made several prototypes. We had some level of innovation in it as well. Rego labels always get torn off in the bush and all that sort of stuff. So although ours was die cast, we had a over molded section in it that was rubberized. Mm-hmm. So these things would just flick out of the way, and so you'd never get a rego label getting torn off in the bush. And they were nice. They were nice little products. And so we produced 5,000 of them, and then Steve and I had 5,000 of them in this back room of my house to assemble.
Wow. Yep.
2 computers, 2 telephones, and just on the phone every day. So our morning consisted of this massive list of shops to call them. Nah, mate, I don't want that shit. And then, eventually you get through 10 and you one be, all right, well, send me a couple. I'll see what they look like. Send a couple. I'd be, these are pretty good. Send me some more. And, they did pretty well. So a lot of shops put them on premium bikes. So they were, instead of crappy little plastic holder. So we must have sold through like 2,000 or 3,000 of these things, all hand assembled by us. I have no idea why we did this, but we offered a chrome range, and in order to get them chrome, because we didn't want the environmental impacts of chrome, we decided to polish them. So these were die cast aluminium. So Steve and I would be down in the workshop underneath the studio, hand polishing these things, and then putting them together, and then and eventually we got pretty much towards the end of the 5,000, and we'd made a little profit, but all that profit was put straight back into the workshop. So we were buying all sorts of tools. We bought a mill, and we converted that into a CNC machine. So we put motors on it and everything. We had it all running, and we did all this stuff. We filled it all out and fitted it up. And the idea was, we were kind of building these 2 bikes at the same time. And we sort of were getting to the end of that product, and the floods hit. So we started in late 2009. It took us about a year to sort of do this. Meanwhile, I was still working at the restaurant and sort of doing this stuff part-time. Steve was working part-time as well, and we were only sort of really coming together a couple of days a week in 2010. And then 2011, floods hit. Everything that we'd put into that workshop, just whoosh, out the door, gone.
It's torture, right?
So caked in mud. So like just things couldn't be resurrected almost, I guess. So, and we lost a heap of stuff as well. Like, bits of a motor would just, floated away and all that sort of thing. And so my house was trashed, workshop was trashed, got no insurance for it. And we had this little business that we'd started, and I was pretty much like, ugh.
I'm off it.
Let's just finish off these couple of projects, like these couple of bikes, shake hands, be on our way, and I'll probably go get a job at another consultancy or something like that. That was, that's the heavens way of telling me that this is a bad idea.
Yeah, follow the path.
Exactly. So we were like, okay, cool, and so we ended up. Funnily enough, the studio portion of the house was the only part that didn't get flooded. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a split level house. So I ended up gutting the front and then basically moving the studio there, and then moving myself and Carolyn to the studio at the back. And then Steve and I were kind of in a in the front of this house with no gyprock on the walls, 2 tables, and a crap ton of product. All these retro tube label holders that we'd stuck into the ceiling.
Yep.
Because we were scared that, obviously the water was going to rise even further. We pulled all that out. So we're just fulfilling the last of these orders. And one of our, one of our highest purchasing clients at the time, they were like, "Oh, Leo, we think this is a really good product, and we think you can build a suite of products off the back of this." And we're like, "Oh yeah, man, we're not doing this. If anything, we're probably going to maybe even turn around and wind this down." And they're like, "Well, how about we buy that product range off you?" And we're like, "Okay, cool. Like, that sounds cool." So they bought the rights to the product, and as a part of that, we were to help them produce another 5,000, not handmade by ourselves.
Yeah.
This time was a little bit different. So we did it proper, which is actually getting the not a fulfillment company, but a company in China who could assemble stuff. So these were made in China at the time because we couldn't get anyone to do such a small volume of die casting here for such a small part. So we had to do it over there. So basically, flew over and had just hired all these random people to like assemble these things.
So you went to a factory?
Yeah. So I've done heaps of factory visits as a part of either working in the consultancy or as a part of Helliver. And this is kind of I'm a massive advocate of manufacturing in Australia, and I really, really want to have that all here. There are just some things that we just don't do here anymore, which is such a shame because I would love to use, Jim down the road or whatever. And where we can, we definitely do. So we still have a lot of parts that we make here, which are locally made, and then we assemble at Ellaspede. Or /Helliver, depending on sort of what the product is. So we definitely still do that, but there are just some things where expertise no longer exists.
Yeah.
And it's like all those old heads who have built-in knowledge in their brain never got passed down to another apprentice because, I don't know, that particular job was deemed undesirable or, whatever.
Gets made redundant.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Like the Mitsubishi factory, for example, like that goes under, and then it's like, oh, okay, cool. Well, all of that knowledge in all of those people's assembly who work on the assembly line, who fit everything together, like these are not robots. These are people who know something very specific, and they have a quite a broad knowledge of that thing. That's all just lost.
100%.
And so that's what happens when you ship it overseas. So unfortunately, we have to go over there sometimes and say, either to China or somewhere else because they have the expertise in producing that particular type of manufacturing method. I was over there with literally an assembly line of people, and I was there as quality control manager and checking every single one. So we delivered 5,000 of these products to this client. Then we did some more design work, and Steve and I were like, look, we got to finish these couple of bikes that we started, and at the time, we didn't have like a lot of technical skill in terms of how to make a lot of things. So we went around to different places, to fabrication shops, and we were like, oh, hey, could you guys make this? And a couple of places we went to, like they were clearly fronts for other activities.
Wow.
So you'd go to this place that was like, oh, this is a custom shop, but it was very geared towards a particular style. And it wasn't the style of bike that we were trying to build.
Yep.
And so, we'd sort of go in there and we'd made a foam like representation, like Steve had hand shaped a foam buck of a tank, and we'd had drawings and everything, to communicate what we wanted. And you'd get these guys like just look at you like, what? You want that? Nah, mate, not making that for you. It's like, unless it's like teardrop, with flames and skulls, I ain't interested, and all that sort of thing. It's like, okay, that's cool, like that's your style, whatever. Okay, so we shopped around. No one would make anything for us. So we're like, okay, cool. I guess we're just going to have to learn how to make these particular things ourselves if we want to see these projects all the way through. And we're both very much the type of people who want to see something finished all the way. It may sometimes take a long time, but we want to see an end to it. So we ended up building these 2 bikes. So we built a CB350 as a donor bike, but not much CB350 left of this thing. So handmade tank, guards, seat, everything. had all this internal wiring and all this sort of stuff. And we're like, oh man, this is pretty cool. And we built an XR 600 and built that into sort of like a street tracker sort of type look, with like a real sort of muscle car, like CUDA sort of, paint scheme on it and all that sort of stuff. And we were like, oh, this is kind of cool. And the plan was just to ride that around and all that sort of thing. And then some friends of friends, as it usually happens in the design industry, one friend's sister, so my now mate Leon, who I didn't know at the time, his sister was a curator of a gallery called Artisans Gallery, and they used to be based right on Brunswick Street in the Valley. And they're like, oh, hey, we heard you guys made some motorbikes, and they look kind of different, and would you guys be interested in having them in the gallery for like a couple of months? And we're like, oh, yeah, sure, all right, whatever. No website, no nothing. Steve and I were like, oh, maybe we should call them Helliver Bikes, because we had the consultancy Helliver. Mm-hmm. And so wanting to sort of do things correctly and sort of, not wanting to tread on people's toes or whatever, we were like, oh, let's do it like a trademark search. So we submitted for a trademark for Helliver, but unfortunately it clashed with a jet boat company in Adelaide.
Oh, really?
That had Helliver jet boats or something. And so they were like, oh, look, nah, too close, not going to let that fly. So, oh, okay, all right, well, let's just come up with a name, because you can't just have like Stephen Leo like in his art gallery.
Yeah.
Like, it just seemed really weird that we're like, oh, let's put something to it.
Yep.
So like, I don't know. And so we floated around a few names, and we liked the Ella, like Helliver part of it. And so we're like, oh, Ella. And then we're kind of like, oh, what if Ella was a girl who liked riding motorbikes and liked going really fast? And it's kind of like, oh, well, Ella at speed. And then it's kind of like, and then the idea of beauty, so Bella, beauty at speed. So we're kind of like, okay, well, these are functional pieces that actually work, but they're art pieces. Yeah, okay, cool, Ellaspede, that sounds great. So we just like slapped the Ellaspede thing on there and put them in the show. And that single thing, I would say, is the reason as to why Ellaspede exists today.
That gallery.
Yeah, 100%. I thank them all the time. They just had people, and you got to, this is 10 years ago. So there's Deus, there's people in Japan, and there's wrench monkeys.
There's a big culture coming through of bikes.
There's not too many people in Australia doing it. Mm-hmm. And suddenly it's on this street where 10,000 cars go past every morning, and there's just dudes like snapping their neck, like trying to look at this gallery window.
So the CB350 and the XR went in there?
Yeah, the XR 600.
Those two?
Yep, those two.
Wow.
And I think we were just rushing to try to get a little postie done as well at the same time. Steve has a real soft spot for posties. I can be brought around to them if they're done in a particular way.
Now they got the Big Banger, the new 125.
Yeah. Well, now they got the electric too.
Do too.
Yeah, I've seen the little, some dude turned up in the tricycle one.
Really?
Yeah, it's got like a little box in the back.
The booth.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we almost watched him tip it on the driveway going out of Ellaspede. We're just like, oh, geez. I feel like there are lawsuits waiting to happen.
Yeah, it's not cool. It's not cool.
Yeah, but that single gallery, man, that did it all for us. And so we just had people like going into the gallery going, what are these bikes? Can I buy one? And then the gallery calling us and saying, Leo, can you guys make a website or something? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know the first thing about making a website. And I was like, I think I've got iWeb on my Mac.
Yep.
So I made this like crappy iWeb website, like Ellaspede and a picture, and it was
contact us.
Yeah, pretty much. And then next minute, the front of my house, which was gutted, like gyprock all off the walls, literally nothing but weatherboard on the outside and studs, was filled with 7 bikes. And we told everyone from the get-go, we're like, we are not building these bikes for you. We can design these bikes for you. And that was kind of going to be our idea. We'd just draw these bikes up and detail them to a point, kind of like an architect does. And then they would get someone to build it. They would find a builder to build it. We did that with the first couple, and then they're like, hey, Leo, I can't get anyone to build it. Everywhere I go to, it's like, these like random places, and they're like, I'm pretty sure I almost got murdered in one of these other ones. Like I'm painting a really bad picture, but like just they couldn't find anyone. And I think it was, I guess it just wasn't a thing yet at the time. And so we were kind of like, oh, okay. And we're like, oh, well, we successfully managed to build these ones. So we're like, look, we can maybe build you some bikes, but it's going to have to come with a pretty big caveat that, there's certain things we're not going to do because it's just going to mess with the bike too much, and it's just mechanically potentially not going to function for you. So very early on, and this is the part of product design that we bring to Ellaspede, is that as a product designer, you design the product, but you find a team who can make that product and make it the best that it can be. So, if it's been made of, if it's being injection molded out of plastic, for example, you find a plastics engineer and you say, hey, what do you reckon about these flow rates? I'm thinking about putting the ribs here in this plastic part, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think the tool's going to be affected? How long, what's the longevity of this tool going to be? Da, 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 da. So Steve and I very early on were like, we need to build a team around us of people who are much smarter than us because we have a vision and we have an idea of what we want to create, but we don't pretend to have the technical know-how to do these sorts of things. So we brought on some mechanics, we brought on some people who just had a very, very good engineering mind. This one particular guy, Adrian, he's a lovely dude, but he was like super weird. Like he was just his mannerisms were really funny. And Steve and I, actually Adrian dropped into the shop a couple of months ago, and he's just a crack up, really funny dude. He's actually one of the dudes responsible for designing the Fisher & Paykel dish drawer.
Oh, really?
Getting all the mechanisms to work in that. So a New Zealand guy and real smart.
Yep.
Engineering wise was like, oh no, you can't do that. I see what you guys are trying to do there. This is the way you could achieve it. Cool. All right. That sounds good. We're happy with that. So at no point were we ever trying to pitch ourselves as bike builders,
yep.
Or as people who could, walk into a workshop and sort of fab something for you. And so, we got through a few of those bikes, and then the front of my house just started to fill up with more and more bikes. So I had 12. Next minute we had 15. I was like, Steve, this is getting ridiculous, man. I need to rebuild my house. I can't just keep living out the back of the studio. I need to get these bikes out of here.
Is it Caroline? What's she saying at this point?
She's cool with it.
She's on for the journey.
Yeah.
Cool.
She's been such a supporter.
Yeah.
My down days when things aren't going right,
yep.
She picks me up, and she's I think I couldn't have married anyone else, one, besides her, but then two, anyone else who wasn't a designer, because she understood, I guess, the ebbs and flows of the process, where it's when you're stuck in that middle of the spaghetti that I was describing
yep.
earlier, it just seems like there's no way out, and that's kind of almost what it was like, sort of building the business to a point where it was frick, I've just gone and dug myself this massive hole, and it's this just it's not playing out as to how I thought it would in
yep.
my head. When it's all these bikes are coming in, okay, cool. Well, we'll treat it like a product. We'll build this team, and then we'll build it up from there. And and it'll work just like we do with these products, because we've got products out on the market that have we've made 500,000 of,
yep.
Or not necessarily Steve and I, but in the consultancy that I work
yep.
for or whatever, for a client, it's that's still working fine.
Yeah, we should be able to replicate.
Exactly. And, but this is my naivety as well. And it's great because I think had I known everything in the beginning, you probably wouldn't have done it.
No.
Yeah. So, Carolyn really, she's been great.
So you had 15 bikes out the front and it was all good.
She was fine with it.
Yep.
And we were married by 2011. So the house was filled up. So we got flooded.
Yep.
And then we set up the shop in West End, and I got married that same year.
Wow, what a year.
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting. So Carolyn's super understanding. And that sales transaction of those Rego label holders, that came towards the end of the year, and she let me cut our honeymoon short so I could go overseas to fulfill that order. Very understanding.
Very.
She asked for very little.
That's
She's,
very good.
So I love you, wife, if you're listening.
If you're this far in.
Yeah.
So
she's like, I've heard all these stories before. I don't want to listen to him dribble.
Nah, I hear him at home. So what era are we talking about here for the 15 point? When did this start? Like you had the flood in 11.
Yeah. So this all happened in the span of about 6 months.
Really, all this happened.
Yeah.
So from flood to the gallery.
Yep.
To building 15 bikes.
To having 15 disassembled bikes
At
in
the
my
start. Yeah.
in my house, and it just got ridiculous. And then so we were like, look, okay, we need to go set up somewhere. And Steve and I were scouring around. Like rent was really expensive at this time. Like 2011's like sort of peaked.
Peaking, yeah.
And then of course there are businesses that have just been flooded, so they're like, we need to move out of our flooded business into a non-flooded business. Yep. And we just lucked upon this crack den of a warehouse. And as soon as I saw the photos on realestate.com or whatever, I was like, Steve, this is it. I found it. Brick building. It was all raw and like grungy and stuff. And it was in the heart of West End. I was like, that's it. Like our whole idea was that we wanted to be within, sort of a couple of K radius of the city. Because we figured that's kind of the people who are going to the art gallery, they're in the valley. So they're the same people who are probably going to come to West End. Yep. And so when we moved in, there was no apartments near us, no nothing. It was just like an empty gravel lot.
Gee, it's changed, hasn't it?
Oh, 100%.
In that time.
Yeah. There's actually, I was there last night picking up something, and I left something at work and I had to go back, and it used to be, past 7 o'clock. It's like, man, this place is kind of, I'm like, yeah. And now it's just, high rises everywhere. Everyone's still partying until 10:30. So you're like, oh, okay, cool. I feel safe.
Yeah. In that short time, like 8 years, 2012, basically.
Yeah.
It's changed.
Yeah. There's, a lot more people walking dogs in the middle of the night. So that's good. And so, we set up in the shop, and that was no easy feat. Like, our landlords are legends. They're really, really nice guys, Nick and Danny. A little bit older than sort of even Steve and I, they were like, "What are you guys doing?" And we sort of told them what we were doing, and they're like, "All right, that sounds cool. Like you guys are trying something new." And, they were in real estate. They've seen a lot of different type of businesses, and they're like, all right, cool, go for it. And they're like, look, here's the shed. It's pretty cheap, but we're not lifting a single finger to help you do anything inside. And this was literally a dirt floor with what we thought was concrete. Turned out it was literally just grout on top of dirt, bare walls with like graffiti all over them, and 2 steel doors that just barely opened and closed. Yep. So we're like, okay, cool. All of that money that we just made from selling that product straight into a fit out. So we're like, okay, and we only had enough money for that fit out. We only had enough money for half the shop. So Steve and I, we got one of Steve's mates, Matt, to help out with, doing the fit out, and he did an awesome job for us. Like, did it on the cheap, and Steve and I are there, like, bashing in nails during the day, and then we'd be going back to my house at night trying to do some more work on some of the bikes, because we wanted to be accountable and have deliverables for our clients, even though a lot of them were like, we totally realized that you guys are just starting up, and they're like, I can see from your house that you guys have got a lot of work ahead of you, but they're like, happy to leave the bike here, etc. Wow. And so we finally sort of got set up, and then it was sort of, that was all of our money gone. Like, we had no money, and and then I still had to fix my house somehow. Yep. And we're like, and still, I think at that point it was like the idea of, okay, let's just get through these 15 bikes and just see what happens. If we have to shut up shop, it's like, we haven't thrown that much money at it. Can definitely recoup from all of this if I just go get a job. It might take me a couple of years, but whatever. It's not the end of the world. This is why I started this now, not when I had a mortgage and a kid and family and all that sort of stuff. So we set up and then started building more of a team around us, and we were just really lucky that we had people like Hewan and Andy who could see what we were trying to do, and we were just up front with them. We're like, man, we got no money. Like, Steve and I are eating our own savings to just feed ourselves. We have no money in the business at all. And at this time, like, we had no business structure, so we had no idea of, like, okay, when should we bill people? When should, like, things take a time to develop a cycle. We now, have that sort of, really down pat, but it takes a long time to establish that. And I had nothing to compare it to either. My parents being in the restaurant industry, that's a same hour transaction.
Fast moving. It's like a fast moving consumer good.
Yeah,
It's just,
exactly. You eat, you pay.
Yeah. Well, you should.
Exactly. To anyone who's done a runner out there, you're a terrible person.
And it'll come back at you.
Exactly. Yep. But in terms of building a motorbike, we thought, okay, well, we'll build it to a certain stage and then we bill. Oh, okay, cool. All right. That makes sense. But it takes you a long time to build a bike. So then what do you do in the meantime? And, what do you do for cash flow and all that sort of stuff? And they are all the things that I wanted to learn. So I think it was great that we literally just jumped in the deep end and had a couple of sharks swimming with us.
Yep.
And, and then we're kind of like, okay, we have to, figure out a way to, sink or swim type thing. And, and so we sort of slowly built it up. And Steve and I guess, over that period of time had, I guess, sort of bigger and bigger dreams as to how, and I guess learning more about it, we sort of wanted to shape it in a particular way. Yep. And so, we've gone through things where we've trialed things and it's like, oh, that didn't really work. And we've trialed other things. We're like, oh, that worked. Great example, Das Hustle. We thought, we all kind of like, we're watching a bunch of flat track people and we're like, man, this is sick. And,
yep.
Sideburn having Dirtquake and all that sort of stuff. Yep. And we're like, oh man, we should get these guys to bring this out. Before we actually started Ellaspede, actually reminds me, I remember emailing Deus and saying, man, you guys really need to set up in Brisbane. Like, I was like, man, there's like a massive culture here for you guys. And they're like, nah, it's not of interest to us. Because I think they were, busy setting up like Milan and Tokyo, like, like all the key cities.
Yep.
And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. And whatever. Like, I mean, that was just kind of like a side thing. I was like, oh, you should definitely do that. And
it was for the picking though. Like, they could have come in here and
dominated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really could have.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. So yeah, I mean, so we really kind of fell into it a little bit, and then
good timing.
Yeah, I guess so.
Good builds.
Not through any strategic foresight of mine, not through a crystal ball or anything. But yeah, we've just been really fortunate that other people have jumped onto the culture at the same time, because obviously without our clients we wouldn't be building anything. No. So that has been amazing. To experience that and being able to trial things, like Das Hustle, and saying, oh, okay, well, for the first year, we're into this. Whatever, let's give it a go. We're going to make a complete loss. We're probably going to make a loss for a lot of years, but this seems like something fun, and it seems like something that people can get on board with without having to, like, have a custom bike built by us. So it was... Because they're very different people. Like an Ellaspede person may not be a Das Hustle person. A Das Hustle person may not be an Ellaspede person.
Yeah. Yep.
Sometimes they're the same, and that's cool. But yeah, for us, it was kind of like, we want to try things and that sort of stuff. And then through that process, and through the process of wanting to express myself, and I think Steve wanting to express himself easily in terms of communication, we were then more on the tools. Steve's definitely been on the tools a lot more than me, and for a lot longer. His family used to run buses in the sort of northern New South Wales area, so they all have private buses that they take kids to school on, and so Steve's very mechanically minded from that. He's built a bunch of cars and all that sort of thing. So it was almost a really good sort of, I guess, partnership in that sense, in the sense that he not only is an industrial designer as well, so he understands kind of what I'm talking about, but he had initially had the, I guess, the ability to sort of make more of those things a reality than what I did. Mm-hmm. And whereas I was really good at doing that on a computer, so that sort of really balanced. Stage. Yeah, it really balanced it out. So I could do all the CAD stuff that we didn't want to do by hand, or that you couldn't do because you just don't have the precision of a CNC machine, or whatever. You can't productionize something that's handmade. So it works really well for us. And then over time, I think, I've particularly been more interested in, I want to just make little things and, like that itch to be like, oh, cool. Well, I have this idea, but I just want to make one off and I just want to make it for myself. So my goal in life, and Carolyn kind of shares this sentiment with me as well, is that by the time I'm 80, I want to be able to look around my house and be like, everything in here has been made by us as her and I.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, we want to be able to sit down and be like, yeah, we made that and that was that year, and we made that and that was that year. And so, yeah, like, now, like, Carolyn and I have been very fortunate to have a baby. So I'm a little baby boy, who I actually named after a famous industrial designer, Dieter Rams.
Right.
I'm a hardcore nerd. I'm a hardcore design nerd. So yeah, like now I'm like dreaming of making things for him.
Yep.
I'm like, cool. I want to make him this. I want to make him that. Or, like, so whatever it is. But none of these things ever see the light of day or anything like that. It's just for us. Yep. But in order to be able to get there, I could either try and get someone to make it for me and interpret my sketches or my CAD or whatever, or I could, learn how to do it myself and learn from that. And when I sort of said before about design being cyclical, that information that you learn while actually making something with your hands then feeds back in to your design process, because you're constantly thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead when you're actually designing on paper. It's like, okay, hang on, how's someone actually going to make this? How's this actually going to be assembled? How's it going to be, whatever. So then the more you learn about that process, or the more you learn about manufacturing, that helps to feed into that. And then, the more you learn as how consumers think, that helps to feed into that as well. So it's just this constant evolution of learning.
Constant cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
The funny thing that I find you saying with this part here about the building part, you've gone like the full cycle back to being the kid with the cannon, the water cannon. I've seen this is what I want to do. And now you're with your own house, that's what you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. And, eventually, obviously, the biggest plan will be Carol and I will build our dream home, set out the way we want it.
Yep.
And yeah, that's definitely
like
the goal.
Every component. As much as you can.
Largely. I mean, I'm, again, very fortunate. Creative industries, you end up picking up a lot of creative friends. We all kind of like gravitate, I think, towards one another.
Yep.
You know what it's like.
For sure.
So,
there's a certain field.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So I've got friends who are, architects and all that sort of stuff. So, we're renovating my place at the moment. And, I've been doing that with my mate Sal, and he's an architect and he's into motorbikes. So we've built him a couple of motorbikes as well out of the shop. And so it's just a really nice process being able to sort of do that and have your vision seen. It's just a constant battle of wanting to express yourself. I think that's really what it is as a designer. Maybe more so than, and when I say everyone has it in them, maybe those people don't tap into that. Alternatively, maybe those people were told at a very young age or at some point in life, nah, come on, give that sort of kid stuff away.
Yep.
You need to go get a real job.
Yep. You're going to be a builder, or you're going to be whatever it may be. This is what you do.
Yeah.
You might have missed the opportunity or whatever you could have been
100%.
really, really good at,
Yeah, which again, I'm thankful for my parents for not being like, no, you need to do medicine.
Yep.
Because I'm pretty sure I'd be a pretty unhappy, might be pretty rich, but I don't know.
Yeah, but it doesn't equate to happiness.
You just end up buying toys or something, I guess. I don't know.
Whereas you're making them.
I think that's kind of the cool thing. I might not have as much money as someone who can go buy a Ferrari, but I could build something that I think is probably as cool, if not cooler, and I can say, oh, yeah, I made that. Someone else might think it's terrible, but whatever, man. It's my expression.
It's everyone's eyes.
Yeah.
Whatever they're painted, whatever their eyes are painted for.
Exactly.
What you find beauty in, not everyone else is going to find. So
exactly.
Your designs, what do you feel like theme wise? Is there any representation of idols currently that you're looking at in what you're doing for your bikes?
There's certainly a lot of people that I respect in the industry, but all for probably different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think Steve and I have a style onto our own. Ellaspede has its own style, which I don't know if we've necessarily quantified, because it's different per individual client that we have. Because we work collaboratively with the client, it usually is their input plus our input.
Yep.
We may steer them a little bit, but ultimately we want to build a machine for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's less about us putting our stamp on it and saying, this is the bike that you're going to get, like it or love it, this is what it is. And again, that just comes back to being, I think, a designer and being user-centered, where you want to make the client happy.
Yeah, that's the goal.
They're paying the money, they're riding around on this thing.
They're the one that should get the stoke factor at the end of the day.
Yeah,
aren't
exactly. So we really try to. So although they don't necessarily all look the same, they have a certain proportion about them. There's certain things that we do that make them look like a certain bike, but I wouldn't say it's a particular theme. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of people who I respect and I look up to in the industry, Japan, for example, you've got a crew of dudes called Heiwa,
right,
and they make amazing bikes. They're fantastic, completely sort of different style to us, but the level of detail that those guys go into, it's phenomenal. So Japanese, just so detail on everything,
precision,
exactly. Yep. And equally so here, in Australia, Nigel Petrie,
mm-hmm.
engineered to slide,
yep.
and all that sort of stuff. Nigel makes some amazing bikes.
100%.
They're, and his level of engineering is fantastic. So there are, I guess, what I would consider peers that I look towards. There are people who are further along in their career, like
yep.
a Chip Foose, for example. There's a lot of really cool people out there who I get a lot of inspiration from. You might look at something and you'd be like, oh, wow, that's really cool. That's interesting how they did that. Not necessarily copy it, but it makes you think, oh, maybe I could do something different with another type of piece that, I guess challenges the way we thought about it, previously. So, but a lot of probably our components and a lot of our bikes have, I guess, a lot of facets of what us as individuals all bring to the team. So there'll be some handmade parts that Steve or Marshall sort of will make. There might be some CNC machine parts, which usually I'm sort of responsible for. There'll be a lot of things and I think it's that sort of, that mishmash of everyone
yep.
that makes that entire bike.
Do you see it at one point being completely in-house? You paint, you CNC, to the stage of being like a mass shop? If that makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. A full dragon. That's
the full dragon.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's called.
Is that industry talk?
That's Asian talk. That's Chinese talk. Yeah. So when you have little shops,
yep.
That's kind of like what we are, little mum and pop shop.
Yep.
When you have that, you do your one thing, but like a full dragon is, you have everything from start to finish.
Yes.
Everything all in house, all built in. I don't think so.
No.
We get to work with some really, really good finishing people. So we get to work with some great painters,
yep.
upholsterers, and I think if we brought them in-house, there might be I don't know. I think I quite like the collaborative approach. I think where we are as a business at the moment is like a real sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
There's 5 of us sort of in total, and we get to sort of do things and play with certain things that don't make us money, but we still have enough money to, we still have enough funds to pay everyone, and then plus we can still do things that make us money. I think the bigger you grow, the more pressure there is for us to get certain things in the door
yep.
that we may not actually really want to do. It's like, oh yeah, I'll say yes to that because that just hits that target for the month. Whereas that's not a position that I think Steve or I really want to be in, because it just stifles your creativity.
Yep.
It's like, oh, okay, well, I got to do this, and it's to a deadline. We build our bikes to a schedule, but if it's like, no, this has to be out next week because we've got the next load coming in, so that we can then make money to pay everyone. It's just not a balancing act that we really want to do. And we've been bigger than 5 people,
mm-hmm.
and we've certainly we've had to do that sort of stuff in the past where we're kind of like, oh man, we just got to get this out. We just, get it in now. It's like, I don't know. I just don't think that's really us. We've been able to produce much better work
Yep.
the way we approach it now.
And that's a smart thing. Like, there's so many businesses that do go the other way. They don't realize their sweet spot, hey? And then all of a sudden, everything looks good because they're moving hundreds of bikes out. This is happening, but they're not making usually any profit. Everyone's just worked to the bone. They're not communicating effectively. And then what have you got left? You're not having any fun, and everyone leaves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses recognize that sweet spot too late.
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably a little bit of a blessing of having Steve, who, he's older than me, so there's a little bit of that foresight maybe as well. And then I'm quite a long-term thinker as well. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, great, we can do a initial sort of ramp up like this.
Yep.
But is that like a sustainable lifestyle that we want to have, or is that that's no holidays, no nothing, no time to go riding?
Yeah, just owned by that.
Yeah.
That machine.
Yeah, and which is where we kind of were a few years ago, I think. Whereas I think right now we're doing a pretty good balancing act.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What happens with Ellaspede? Like, more dust hustles, or like, what happens now?
Yeah, well,
because we had Ewan in, and we discussed this off air, but he was the breaker of good news, how good dust hustle is, and you've been ditched here the second time, and we have to talk about it not happening due to whatever.
2020.
2020.
Yeah, due to 2020.
I couldn't even call it a name.
Yeah.
But no dust hustle this year.
No dust hustle this year, which is a real bummer.
Everyone still can ride their bikes.
Yes, yeah. We were holding out hope there for a bit, and the deadlines just keep getting pushed further and further back, and all that sort of thing. And
everyone was keen to come Christmas Day.
Everyone's like, "Is this really happening, Christmas Day?" And we're like, "No, we just had to pick a date because the Facebook group thing would have dropped off and all that sort of stuff."
You're doing Mark Zuckerberg on the phone saying, You're going to do this on the 24th?
So, unfortunately, no, not happening. And it's a blow to us because we were like gaining a lot of momentum behind it. But for us, the big thing is there's a lot of, I guess, requirements for holding any event as to how you hold the event, and, making sure that people don't come in contact with one another and, don't get sick. And for us, the last thing that we want to happen at the event is a bunch of people attend the event. We get 2,000-3,000 spectators come. 2 of those people get sick and then take it home, and that accidentally kills, some sort of elderly family member or something. I don't know, whatever it could be. Yep. We, one, don't want to be responsible for that. And 2, I think the event would just be completely different to how we've had it in the past. And I think the way we've had it in the past is kind of the reason why it's successful. So we were just like, look, let's just head down, bum up. We'll just do other work. We've got a couple of other events that are coming up, which will be announced soon. So they'll be happening in November. We're doing that in collaboration with a much bigger group.
Cool.
And that will be not as fun as Dust Hustle, but it's something to put on the calendar for sure.
Cool. Yep.
So they'll run for a couple of months as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So like a summer series.
Yeah. So it'll be pretty cool.
Yep.
And everyone will be able to attend and all that sort of stuff, and it'll be safe and all that sort of stuff, all that sort of thing. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
That should be nice to see.
Yeah.
Mate, if there was no budget dependencies, what would be a bike that you'd want to build? Because everything's outside communication. You've got a customer comes in, there's this and that. But what would be something you'd want to build for yourself?
Oh, for me personally?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think for me, the next sort of bike would be, say, something like a board tracker.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, like I wouldn't ride it. Like I'd literally just build a thing pure.
Be an art piece.
Yeah, yep. For just pure aesthetics. Yeah, maybe something like that.
Yep.
I have dreams of building a Harley and building sort of having one of every sort of bike category. But I got to get my personal shed at home sorted out first.
Yep.
Just so they can rack them up nicely. Although Carol and I want to be surrounded by the things that we make, we are incredibly minimalist people. So yeah, like we do not let random stuff into our house, and so yeah, we are very particular.
So it's there. If it's there, it's there for a reason.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. We
Cool.
we declutter a lot all the
Yep.
time, and so much to the point people were just like, man, you guys are like monastic. we're like, well, we're not that bad.
But it's just, it's the way you are.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It just keeps. I think both of our brains, like, we think a lot about a lot of stuff.
Yep.
So being able to come home to a space where it's just a clean, clutter-free environment really helps us sort of recharge for the next day.
Yeah, you're out of clutter.
Yeah.
Like your brain, everything mentally as well. What's the best thing about being a motorcyclist?
People, the other motorcyclists that you meet.
The good and the bad.
And
There's not many bad ones.
Yeah, there's not many. There's not many. I think like everyone has an interesting story as to why they're into bikes, and like they're some of my best mates. Like I've met through riding. I've had great holidays or riding tours with them and all that sort of stuff. Like.
Yeah.
When I saw you last time in New Zealand.
Yeah, we're sitting in Invercargill in about 7,000 knot winds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They know how to produce wind down there.
How good was Burt Munro?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And again, another massive idol. So I remember, fourth year uni, World's Fastest Indian, sort of third or fourth year uni, World's Fastest Indian came out. I watched that, I think, on repeat like 10 times, like, in a row. And I was just like, man, this guy, like he just had an idea and he just followed it all the way through.
Did it, didn't he?
Yeah. And I just thought it was amazing. And, him and guys like Britain as well.
I was going to ask you about that as well.
Yeah.
Good? Fan?
Oh, yeah. Massive, man. Like, not just the motorbike side. There's actually a Grand Designs episode of his daughter. She's redone their family home, which he hand built by hand.
Oh, that was in the original documentary. That house.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
watch
that got affected by the earthquakes.
Yep.
And they were still, like, the mum was still living there, and the daughter ended up sort of buying it off the mum, and that house is amazing. Like, handmade balustrades, all like sort of Art Nouveau, like sort of leaf details and stuff. He would have been like 20.
Yeah.
I'm like,
so young.
I just sort of think to myself, I don't know, like, there's some amazing individuals out there.
Yep.
And again, motorcycling has exposed me to a bunch of those amazing individuals. I was there in New Zealand with my mate Neil, and that's great. Like, he loves riding, I love riding. We're away doing this thing, but Monroe's part of the reason as to why I got into motorbikes, and like finally getting over there. And it's like, yeah, cool. Got over to Invercargill. Definitely worth doing, people, if you're thinking
Awesome
about doing
experience. When I seen you, we were in the
the haze.
You'll say Bunnings, but we were in a haze.
Yeah.
And was it Neil? Was he on a BM?
Yeah.
And you had a Himalayan.
I had a little Himalayan.
How was that experience?
It was the last bike that I could choose. So it was not the last bike I would choose, but it was the last bike that I could rent over there.
Because you can imagine the week of the Burt Munro Festival, everyone's
100%.
riding motorcycles.
Yeah, and Neil flew into... he flew up a little bit further and met our mate Ray, and they drove and rode down. And then I flew straight into Queenstown.
Right.
Again, testament to how cool Carolyn is. Dita was, I think, a month old.
Oh, really?
And she was like, and I was like, oh, hey. And I had an opportunity to go. Initially, I was meant to go to a car racing event over there. I got invited by a dame in New Zealand. They run the Scope Classic. And she was like, oh, yeah, you guys should come over. I'd met her through the shop, and she's an avid motorcyclist who does not ride. She pays a dude. She has two Indians, one in the northern hemisphere and one in the southern hemisphere. Yeah. She pays a guy to ride, and she sits on the back, and his wife is the support vehicle.
Wow.
And they go all over the world on the back of a motorbike. And she goes all over the world on the back of a motorbike.
Wow.
I thought that was weird.
That's weird.
I was like, that's really cool. Like,
that's unreal.
Yeah, so...
And you met them through the shop originally?
Yeah, so they came through, again, artisans. Romy, she was one of the people who worked at Artisans, and she was curating an art gallery over in New Zealand. And there's this dame was basically a patron,
Yep.
and they organised like an art junket, and as part of one of their tours, they were like, oh, let's go to Ellaspede, and so we met her, and she was like, oh, you got to come to the Scope Classic, and so the idea was to go there initially,
Yep.
and then ride all the way down the South Island to the Burton Monroe Classic, and I was like, oh, this is going to be way too long. It's going to be like a full week and a half
full
away.
tour. Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. So I decided to sort of cut the trip in half, fly into Queenstown,
Yep.
and the people who I rented the bike off, I can't remember the name of them. They're absolute legends. A husband and wife team who basically bought this business.
Yep.
But yeah, literally the Himalayan was the last little
thing.
bike.
They're not that bad.
They're not that bad. They are definitely built for a price point.
Yep.
And that's reflected, and that's fine. If you want to buy a bike at that price point, you get a lot of bike for that price point. They had heated grips on, aftermarket heated grips.
Did they? Yeah.
And I was like, psst, whatever. As if you need heated grips. Thinking of
Thinking of
riding here
Queensland.
in Brisbane. And yeah, like first corner, I'm like, this is New Zealand, it is freezing. I'm like, those heated grips are jacked up to like 1,000.
They're so good heaters. I cop a bit of shit about them. But I love heated grips.
They're
Not so much up here, but when I travel anywhere,
100%.
such a good thing.
And it's surprising how warm it keeps you.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Like-
if your hands are warm, everything up here is warm.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
like
where
a-
it all comes through.
It's like a reverse intercooler for your,
For your body.
yeah, for your body.
Riding in New Zealand, good.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. If, again, if people have not had the opportunity or thinking about going somewhere, if this bubble opens up between Australia and New Zealand,
Go there.
definitely go riding in New Zealand. It is absolutely amazing. The scenery, the people,
The roads.
everything. Yeah, the roads,
Yep.
absolutely amazing. We rode all the way up to the Remarkables one day. We got up to the top, rode down, and we were like, oh man, that down section was really good. So we rode back up again and then rode back down.
Himalayan too.
Yeah, it was. I was getting it over. I was scraping pegs, and
it's good.
it wasn't hard because it's
it
like
happens.
a slight lean angle, and but yeah, that was fun. It was looking like the other bikes that they had an option to rent. Like they had some Harleys, and they had a few other bikes. That was probably the better choice, mainly because the other guys were on adventure bikes. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that made sense. So we went and did some sort of like semi-dual sporty stuff and all that sort of thing, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
it was good to see you there, and the how you always hear this was a 1 in 100 year weather event, and that week was 1 in 100 year. So we flew into Dunedin on, I think it's the Tuesday, and we didn't realise Elton John was playing the Tuesday night in Dunedin.
Oh, wow.
So it was like $450 a night for accommodation in Dunedin.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, geez. We're not going to do that. We're going to book down at this other place down towards Invercargill. So we went to drive down there, and it flooded. The road got washed away. We couldn't go there.
Right, yeah.
So we were on the phone at Brizzy Airport just before we left. We were trying to get accommodation somewhere in Dunedin, and we ended up getting this one place, which was great. They looked after us. And then the next day, bang, we went to go back down, got halfway to Invercargill, and the road got blocked from everywhere south. Like you couldn't get anywhere south. So we're like, oh, what are we going to do? So back up to Dunedin again. And I think the next day there's someone else playing there. And yeah, New Zealand's a hotspot of activity too. There's so much on in such small places.
Yeah.
You can do heaps there. It's a good joint.
And I was really surprised with Invercargill as well. We were Neil and I were lucky to go with Ray because he's a New Zealander through and through.
Right.
And very proud New Zealander who could tell us a lot about the area. I had no idea that any beer that you bought in Invercargill, all of those proceeds actually go back to the town, and it has to be spent on sporting complexes.
Wow, that's cool.
And I was like, wow. And because I was like, why are there so many like random like sports centers at the bottom of this country? And Ray was like, oh yeah, any of the alcohol that you buy here, this is how it gets cycled back through the community. I was like, that's really smart.
Smart, yeah.
And so that brings a lot of teams there and all that sort of thing, and brings events like the Burton Monroe event, obviously because it's in Invercargill as well, but yeah, there's like a really rich motor like history down there. For
sure, not just the Burt part, but like to have those circuits there, and that obviously there's a reason, and that's obviously it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and I think the main person who set that up was like a really big trucking family.
Richardsons.
Yeah, that's it. And did you go to the museum?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, both, like the car and the motorbike one? Yeah.
Oh, mate.
So cool.
It's unreal. Yeah, it was. I didn't expect so much.
Yeah.
Like when we went to the truck one.
Yep.
And we walk in and we're like, oh wow, okay. Like, because we were going to film. It was our last day, and there's days worth of filming there.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. It's good.
It's that car one blew me away.
Yeah.
Mainly as well because so when I was mentioning before that my great granddad and my great uncle
Yep.
came to Sydney to set up veggie markets and all that sort of stuff. There's a really old family photo of him in a truck in an international, and I was like, wonder if there's a lot of internationals here. I'm like, I wonder if they've got the same sort of one that my great uncle had. And so I was like going around searching. I was like, pretty sure that's it. It's got like the same details on it. It looks almost exactly the same. Wow. And so I was like, wow, there you go. So like seeing stuff like that and the way it was presented in the museum was really,
State of
really
the
cool.
art.
Yeah.
No, it was incredible. That fire truck when you walk in the door.
Yep.
That's like, wow, look at that old mobile tanker.
Yeah.
That was not fire truck, fuel tanker, sorry.
Yeah.
Shouldn't confuse those two things. But it was red, you know? So, but I did see that photo on your Insta. I seen that. So that was literally identical to the...
Yeah. I was like, that's kind of cool. It's, that's, and I don't know, just, again, I really like a lot of sort of historical stuff. I'm very much live in the future. I look at a lot of futuristic stuff and, love sci-fi and all that sort of thing, but I always love looking at sort of vintage,
Where
older.
would it come from?
Yeah. Like I like to see a timeline of a product. How a radio turned into a TV and now turned into a computer and now into a mobile phone.
Now into AI.
Yeah, exactly. With Neuralink. Straight there. Just displaying my eyeball.
Yeah. It's not far.
Yeah.
Tell me about your pickup. Is that your daily?
Oh, I thought you were talking about my pickup game with Carolyn. Terrible dad jokes, mate.
That was
you
real
cut that out.
You're 6 months into the dad stuff. But is that your daily?
That is my daily, yeah. So
what is it?
It's a C20.
Yeah.
So same as a C10 Chevy. So 67 to 72, they ran pretty much all the same. Second series Chevy. But every 2 or 3 years they did a facelift. So I've got a 72, which is affectionately known as the cheese grater grill on the front. So this is just another story as to how cool Carolyn is. So Hugh and I, for a while there, I was looking at a ute. I was looking at something that I could throw a couple of motorbikes in, and I wanted something kind of cool. And so I was looking at Chevys there for a while. We then, Hugh and I went on that Sailor Jerry ride.
Yes.
So, yeah, that was really fun. With
Yeah.
a bunch of other people, and one of the guys on there, Harley, he was the support mechanic. He had a Chevy C10, and that just pretty much pushed me over. I was like, that's it. I'm getting a Chevy, because at the time I was sort of tossing up between a few different trucks, and I was like, that's it. I want to get one of these. So jump back online, sort of straight on Gumtree, and I was like, I'm looking up C10s, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure C20s are exactly the same as a C10, except they've just got a different axle, because the C10s had a half-ton carrying capacity, and a C20 has a 3/4 ton, and then the C30s had a full ton, but the C30s look completely different. And so I was like, I might look up C20s as well, because the only C10s that I could find were all beds were chopped, full hot rod. I was like, I don't really want to buy someone else's project. I want to buy something that's pretty stock standard, because eventually I want to do something with it. And so I was like, ahhing, found a C20 in Bathurst, and I was like, man, this is sick. Contacted the guy, and I was like, I just don't know. I don't know about the color. I was like, I don't want a blue truck. And I'm like, it's going to be a while before I get around to actually doing this truck up. I'm planning on driving it for a bit. So I was like, I'll just, I was like, I'll get a mechanical check done on it, and I'll just see what happens. And so I did a mechanical check on it, passed with flying colors, and then the guy hit me up, and he's like, oh, yeah, what do you reckon? Do you think you want to buy it? And I was like, mate, I do, but just the cost of respraying it and everything, I said I might just park it for now. I'll look at it in a little bit. And this is a few years ago.
Yep.
And so literally, I think 12 months passed, and I saw that ad still on Gumtree.
Wow.
And so I hit him up and I said, hey, dude, is the truck still for sale? And he's like, yeah. He goes, man, you are literally the only person who's been very serious about it in terms of getting a mechanical check and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, look, I'm not going to be rude, but I'll offer you this much because I know that I want to do a heap of stuff to it.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's fair. He's like, I need a new car because I got a new job and I can't be driving this every single day. And he's like, all the stuff that you're talking about that you want to do to it, I want to do to it too. So I want to see that happen. So I was like, all right. So I pretty much said yes to her on a Friday, called Carolyn that afternoon and said, oh, hey, I booked us 2 tickets. We're going to Bathurst. And she's like, why's that? And I was like, I just bought a car. And she's like, righto. So I flew into Sydney. We had to fly on 2 separate planes because I missed the plane because at the last minute I was like, oh, I better pack some tools just in case this, I'm gonna drive this thing back from Bathurst. So I don't know. So I was like, I'll pack some tools, and I just completely forgot that I had to throw it into check-in.
To check-in, yep.
And so the guy at the check-in counter was like, you guys are about to miss your flight, and I was like, you go first. I'll pay the extra $150 or whatever that I need to pay to get the next flight. So jump in a hire car, drive to Bathurst, look over the car. I pretty much bought it already. And I was like, yeah, here you go, here's the money. And the guy's like, so you taking this to a shipping company or something like that to ship it up to Brizzy? And I was like, nah, man, I was planning on driving. It's got a roadworthy, right? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, and I was like, it's going to make it, isn't it? He's like, I don't know, man. The furthest I've driven is Sydney. And I was like, all right, whatever. So, driving this...
Committed now.
Yeah, driving this truck on the, driving on the wrong side of the road and...
Oh, it's still left hand.
Yeah. So she's OG, man.
Never converted.
No. So she's proper original California truck. Yeah. And someone had done some work to it in the States. They won a little award or something like that for it. But it was a long time ago. I feel like it was sort of 10, 15 years ago that the truck was done. And never a full body off.
Yep.
I don't think the underneath has been done. And certainly it doesn't look like it. And anyways, Carol and I driving back, and the first night we're like, oh, we need to try to make it here. And this being an old car and everything, the fuel's gone from being full to being half within the matter of moments. And we'd been driving ages, and I'm like, what the hell? I would have thought it only just dropped by a little bit. Didn't think we were, sort of chewing up that much. And we're like, oh, okay. And so, it's getting later on the night, and it's like, it's pretty much empty, and we're driving into these sort of country sort of, servos that are not 24 hours. And we got to one that was pitch black, and I could see the tellers inside. And they were like, we're closed. And I was like, I just need some fuel. And I'm like, is there a 24-hour place? I'm trying to talk through the window. I'm like, is there a 24-hour place nearby? And I was so unplanned. This is how I am half the time. Some things I'm really, really planned. Other things I'm just like, yeah, whatever.
Spur of the moment.
Yeah. And so we're just like, oh, okay, cool. And they're just like, yeah, drive, an extra, couple of Ks down the road. Oh, I don't think I'm going to make it. And so, I'm like, Carolyn, we may have to sleep in the car tonight. And so we drive and get to a 24-hour place, pump it full of fuel, and bought a spare jerry can, filled that up just in case.
Yep.
And then drove all the way back.
Wow.
So she hasn't missed a beat. The part of the reason why the guy was selling it, he was saying, oh, it doesn't really start that well. And the beauty of having the shop and the beauty of having guys who know a lot more than me about stuff is, they took one look at it and they're like, oh, Leo, the timing's just out. So timing gun on it, set it all right. That's it.
What engine?
The original 350 small block.
Oh, it's 350.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That might come out in favour of an LS.
No.
Everyone does an LS swap, I know. But twin turbo LS in a Chevy.
Oh, now that twisted my arm.
But it sounds pretty cool, and they do just drop straight in.
Really?
They you can get mounting brackets and all that sort of stuff for it, and that's part of the reason as to why I chose a Chevy.
Yep.
Still out of the States, there's still so many parts for it.
Yep.
And because of the years in which they span.
Yep.
67 parts will fit on my 72, and they're interchangeable.
Just heaps of stuff. Eh?
Yeah. Whereas if I went the Ford route, and don't get me wrong, I don't have any sway Ford or Holden. I don't really get into that. But if I had chosen a Ford, they're very, very specific because their make and models dive down.
Short models.
Yeah. So it's kind of so again, that was sort of some pre-planning. It's like, if I'm going to go. When I have parts, I want to have the widest range of parts available to me, so I'll probably go to the Chevy route.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very smart. Have you ever heard of a place called Denchuck?
No.
They're based in LA. It's Denchuk Industries, and they originally built for the Tri-5, so 55, 6 and 7 Chevs.
Oh, okay.
So for the sedans. And I've been over to the manufacturing place a few times, but I think they're doing pickups and stuff now. So and they reproduce every part. So you walk into their showroom, they got a 57 Chevy on a dolly, so on a stand.
Yeah, wow.
And they've got it as a modern 57 on one side, and on the other side it's the original drum brake, original suspension model. So they've got 2 different parts models that you could go for. You can go for the retro mod.
Yeah, wow.
Really cool place. So if you're ever after anything, have a look at Denchuk. And
okay.
They do all reproduction stuff and really top quality gear.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about your model, but it's been a while since I've been there, so they probably picked up a few different models too.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of guys in the States that I do follow for the truck side of things.
Yep.
What are their names? A couple of brothers. They build amazing cars. Like absolutely amazing cars. Like CNC machine door handles and
it's awesome.
Man, the stuff that these guys do, it's phenomenal. They build a lot of K series Chevys. So the K series were the 4-wheel drive versions.
Yep.
Which I'm sure you know.
I love my vehicles. So it's crazy to see in the States now, and we were talking about Joe Rogan and that before. I don't know if it's single-handedly, but he's made Land Cruisers popular.
Yeah, there's I think definitely the Icon movement.
Land Cruisers and Broncos with Icon. It's huge, eh?
Yeah. Well, I got Ray and Neil, who I was on that New Zealand trip with. They're Land Rover through and through.
Are they?
Yeah. They're big sort of Defender fans, and and I'm just like, whatever, man. You guys aren't as cool as Chevys.
I've started hanging around Andrew from Adventure Garage and that. I'm into it too.
Yeah. They're definitely cool.
Yeah. Arms twisted on that as well.
What do you think of the new one?
What one? The Land Rover?
The new Defender.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think, I like everything Land Rover's done for the last few years, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it's really good. It's non-conventional.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like any other SUV or four-wheel drive in the market, which is pretty hard at the moment, because you could go out the front to the car park here and nearly every other four-wheel drive would look fairly similar.
Yeah, yep.
And Land Rover's new shape, new design, for me, doesn't look like anything like any other.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
I think it's cool. It's a really good expression of industrial design. You can clearly tell that there are some products you can look at and you're just like, industrial designers had their way with that and gotten it all the way through.
Yep.
Quite often not in a large company like that. A designer almost sits at answering to an accountant and a number cruncher. But when a designer is able to break out of that, say Jonathan Ives from Apple, who worked literally hand in hand with Steve Jobs, did not have to, answer to an accountant or a business development manager or whatever it is, or the marketing team. You can see that you can see their language, and you can see what they thought, and they were able to put all of that from paper into reality.
Yep.
Bar obviously, the standards that they have to adhere to. But yeah, there are certain products that you can see that for sure.
And the Land Rover's one?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I reckon it's a thing of beauty. I honestly do.
Yeah. What do you reckon of the Ineos Grenadier? Have you heard of that?
No, tell me.
So a couple of guys, UK pub, they're like, they're going to can the Defender. They're not going to bring it back out anymore. And like the boxy shape. And and they're like, it's a travesty. We should, these must be some pretty rich people in a pub too. They're like, we should start a car company and we should make a utility four-wheel drive like they should be made. And the main guy who they have as the head designer is an architect. And he does explain it quite well, because it looks very similar to a Defender, but the old shape Defender, the sort of square body one, and he said, look, if you get most hammers look the same, they're serving a purpose. It's a utility item. It's like it's got tool. This, and you can pull the panels off, and you can replace them. So then they got in. I think they must have got funding from Ineos, the fuel company, and they're now producing a car.
Wow.
So they've got I think MAN did the suspension on it.
Like MAN that makes trucks and stuff. Yep.
Yeah. So they're not messing about. They've got proper, proper engineering and proper people behind it, and it's set to launch here in Australia as well. And
Really?
And they're really aiming for that sort of middle, sort of cruiser Prado market. where it's like 80 grand.
Yeah, right.
They'll have it's like a really I haven't seen the interior of it yet. I've only seen the exterior.
Yep.
It's well thought out. It's really cool.
It's pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to look at that one.
Yeah. And that's the age we live in now as well.
Yeah.
That you can have 3 people who are in a pub
For sure.
and are like, let's start a car company.
Yep.
And then they're like, cool, let's go get some funding. And
It is.
minute, a few years down the track, and it's like, okay, cool, here we go.
You don't need to be forward holding. You don't need to be the Detroit players anymore.
No, yeah.
You know, so it can be done.
We spoke about Elon before, and
He's done it.
Yeah, exactly. And he obviously he had a bit of help initially, and
Yep.
when they were doing the Lotus conversions way back when, and all that sort of stuff.
I think we're about to run out of film.
Nice,
I don't want to cut the conversation. So if anyone's watching, it's just going to run out of film. Arch Motorcycles or Arc, Keanu Reeves. What do you think of those?
I think they're pretty cool. Again,
do?
another expression in a different type of language, and also a bit of a different bend. Mm-hmm. You can tell that the guys want to go for a lot of performance stuff and all that sort of thing.
Race shape.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard not to like John Wick. He's freaking Keanu Reeves is just like cool, isn't he? He's such a cool dude. So, he jumps on a motorbike. He's even cooler.
Yeah, he goes and does a track day at Laguna Seca.
Yeah.
Does this, does that as well. Like, he does it.
I took up surfing because I watched Point Break as a kid.
No.
Yeah, 100%. I was like, this is it,
Wow. No, he's a cool person.
Yeah.
Definitely a cool person. I like the bikes personally. I think they look awesome.
Yeah.
Roland Sands.
Yeah, cool as well. Cool. So, I love what...
I'm just going to pick your brain here.
Yeah, no. I love what he's been able to do in terms of elevating, parts in the industry.
Like hard parts.
Yeah, hard parts. Yeah, I think, but obviously, his dad and his background. I think his dad's got probably one of the largest CNC machining shops
for sure
in America. But, I think not everyone's going to capitalize on that. He's been able to.
Yep.
And, from all accounts, a really rad dude as well. Like, we were lucky enough to meet a couple of the heads of Bell in the United States. They came, when they came out to Australia, and they were talking about how they hang out with Roland Sands all the time. And they're like,
was this last year?
A couple of years ago, actually. Yeah.
Okay,
so can't remember what it was for. A couple of years ago.
Wow.
This past 10 years is a bit blurry.
Yep.
It's sometimes I'm kind of even in the shop, we're like, what year did we do this? And
I met the industrial designer from Bell.
Oh, did you?
Last year.
Yeah, wow.
The year before. Yeah, he was over here.
Yeah.
And interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting, and just the way that they've changed the whole business. You can see the Bell helmets. It's changed. It's channeled into a total different way it was, say, 10 years ago, or longer, because it's such a long history. But yeah, interesting guy. But I forget his name. I thought it might have been the same dude.
No, this was he was like their CEO.
Wow.
Yeah, he'd come out.
Yeah.
But yeah, he hangs out with Roland and
Yep.
and because obviously they've got like a really good partnership and
sure.
collaboration. And we're like, what's he like? Like, is he like secretly? We're like, oh, I hope you say he's a dickhead because you can't be that nice. Like, you can't do all this great stuff and then but no, he's like, man, he's a legend. I was like, oh man, that just makes it like awesome
really
to
cool.
hear that it's like that he's not one thing in that you hear about.
Yeah, two-faced person.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like that's really cool and it's reflected in his business.
100%.
Yeah.
He has changed the game.
Yeah.
I think, like, you look at Deus, you look at Roland, their game changes in their time.
If it wasn't for Deus, this whole the whole Japanese aesthetic coming to say Australia and then to the rest of the world, I don't know whether or not that would have happened in that way.
Scale.
Yeah. Deus just Dare Jennings just an absolute marketing genius, but then also obviously just a really hardworking business person as well.
Yep.
Being able to see that and say, oh, I can create a vision out of this and I can make something. I was lucky enough to hear Dare speak as well.
Really?
Yeah, this is years ago. This would have been like 2010, 2009. So I had the bike.
Yeah.
I had my Deus bike, but I hadn't started Ellaspede yet. It was right in between. And he came up and spoke, and he was just a really nice dude. Yeah.
And what's his, like, I know he's man bow tie and that originally. Is he just purely a businessman?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's
Yeah.
his
So
thing,
he the way this is in the talk that he mentioned. So the reason why it's called Mambo initially is that it was a record label, and he was trying to sign punk bands, but Mambo being like sort of like roots in music and all that sort of stuff, and he wanted that juxtaposition between punk bands and that. I think he signed a few and they were going nowhere. Yeah, and he was like, oh, so he started producing like T-shirts to fund the I guess the music side,
the failing record company.
Yeah, and then as I think creatives do, sort of mix amongst the same circle. So he's in amongst the art scene. Yep. Good mates with Reg Mombassa. Yep. So then next minute that sort of kicked off that side of things, and then he said he spent like the next 20 years just flying around the world, going to doing different collections, picking samples and doing all sorts of stuff and building that up, and then eventually selling that off. I think for quite a sizable amount of money. For sure. And then between him and I think there are some other people who were on board for Deus as well. I have a feeling that it's either Roy or HG. One of them has, I think, bought in initially as well. Yep. I don't know. I could be speaking out of turn there. I'm not sure. But
what's their name? Greg Pickhaven and I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Just
but
Fatso.
One of those guys.
That's all I think about when I think about those guys. 2000 Olympics, Fatso. Fatso the Wombat.
The battered Sav.
Yeah.
That was such a good call. That was a good era.
That was.
Good era for comedy when people could be funny.
And Carol and I were just talking about it the other day. We were just like, man, that was so funny. Like as a kid, you'd watch the 2000 Olympics, but I was more interested in watching the Dream afterwards.
When 9:30 came around, the Dream was on.
That's it.
It was the best calls of, like, it couldn't be done now.
No.
You just couldn't get away with half the stuff.
Yeah, the gymnastic calls that they were doing. Well, there's the Nutcracker, and all that. You just sort of think, oh man, these guys are hilarious.
I remember that vividly. That 2000 Olympics, and we're the same age. That was such a big thing for you.
Kathy Freeman. Yep. coming down that spacesuit thing.
Suit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was it was really iconic, I think.
It was.
For Australia and for Sydney.
Yep.
Yeah, such a cool thing. Actually, one of my mates' godfather actually has one of those Kewpie. I don't know if you remember in the Sydney Olympics, they had like these Kewpie dolls. So Kewpie dolls used to be given to kids when they were born in hospital. All right. It's the same Kewpie doll that you see on mayonnaise bottles. Okay. Those Japanese mayonnaise, the Kewpie mayonnaise. Yeah. And Ivan, one of our sort of kind of like family friends, he's got one of those sort of fiberglass like Kewpie dolls. Really? It's massive. This thing's like 2 stories high. Yep. And he's got it planted in the front of his house in Byron.
That's cool.
It's pretty cool. It's just like, oh man, it's a piece of the Sydney Olympics.
Yeah. So that's where it came from 2000.
Yeah.
Hey, it was cool. Like it was for me. The little part was I remember about 92. I think it was announced. I think it was the end of the Spain. I think it was 92 was Spain, Barcelona.
And the winner is Sydney.
Yeah. I remember my grandparents saying that year you'll be able to drive. Oh, and I was always, because I'd loved vehicles from before I was born. And I was like, yep, I'm going to be able to drive. And that's when we got to drive. I was like, this is sick. Like, Olympics is on, I can drive. And
were you old enough to drive to high school?
Yep. Yeah, because I'm born early in the year.
Yeah. Me too.
Freedom, mate. When are you born? What month?
April.
April? I'm Feb. So
there you go. Yeah,
good.
okay. Yeah.
So it was, 2 weeks into the year, into the last year, and freedom.
Yeah, freedom. But then, I don't know, I somehow became like the Uber driver for like all my mates to the parties. Yeah,
it was weird. I did the same as well, but my grades improved when freedom came.
Okay.
Yeah, my last 2 years were good.
Yeah.
Which is what you want, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but mate, I don't know if we've blown Huon's record apart. We're pretty close. We're 2 hours and 50, I think. Yeah. So we've done well. But cameras have failed, and that's all on Panasonic because there's no adapters in the world at the moment for Panasonic GH5. So thank you so much for coming in, mate.
Mate, thank you very much for having me, Mick. And everyone, that's a call to action as well for you. Let's pump this podcast up for Mick as much as we can, so that we can get these Panasonic, I don't know, some Reds in here or something like that. For you.
Mate, if we can get some Reds, it's a game changer.
Yeah, no worries.
But appreciate everything you do, mate. And you're one of the first ones that gives me feedback on my show too, which is I don't don't care about compliments, but it's really cool to hear people that are listening and appreciating it. So thanks, man.
Yeah, I think anyone doing anything new, anything out of their comfort zone and all that sort of stuff, should definitely be, celebrated.
Yep.
There's heaps of podcasts all online. A lot of it comes from usually different countries. And I sort of think, it's cool that you're doing it here and just literally doing it in our backyard.
Yeah,
in
mate.
Brisbane.
We're here. So, mate, come down for a ride sometime and we'll definitely catch up. Hopefully these 3 events or this summer series of events, we can do some stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome, mate. Take
All the
care.
best with it. Cheers.
Thank you.
See ya.